Selkirk wanted to speak more, and I cut the meeting off, and I think what I should have done is ask the body if we want to extend a few more minutes, and that was my mistake, and for that I owe Dr. Selkirk an apology and this body an apology, and I can assure both the body and the public that in the future, if that comes up again, I will ask the body for its preference and defer to what the body wishes to do. So again, please accept my apologies.
I accept it.
Next we get to committee reports. Mr. Coffey, I know you're out of town, but
Mr. Chairman.
No report?
No.
Thank you. Ms. Johnston.
No report.
Mr. Flynn.
No report, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Osiander.
I'm sure everyone will be pleased to know the Title 21 Committee is not going to be meeting on Thanksgiving Day. No, we are not. However, we will be meeting again on December 4th, and hopefully that will be our only meeting in December. Our goal is to finish our amendments for Chapter 3.
Thank you. Ms. Drummond.
No report, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
And I will note for the public, although many were not in attendance, we had a joint meeting of the Assembly and the School Board last Friday. That was almost 2 hours we spent talking about many topics, and that took place Friday. Dr. Selkirk.
Yes, I'd like to report on just kind of the follow-up work session that we had with NSTAR last week, which is linked to this work that the Community and Economic Development Committee is doing regarding energy, and the importance, I think, of all of us staying on task on this energy issue. It's clear that NSTAR is concerned about having adequate supplies of gas to get us through the winter, and I believe they'll be preparing some items for us to look at, and also the Energy Committee will be bringing forward some recommendations, I believe, at our next meeting so that we can begin to address this. The other thing I wanted to suggest to the Assembly is in terms of what was shared with us, and that we're remote, we're hoping it's a very remote possibility that Anchorage could find itself in a situation where it didn't have adequate gas and that the system could go down. I think that implies a lot of serious consideration, and that we should begin, at least in some ways, to understand the dimensions of that possibility, and also, if it were to happen, how we would function or what we would do as a community in terms of the fact that we've got hospitals that need support and people who are on life support systems that are dependent on having adequate electricity and gas. And so I'm hoping that perhaps we could spend some time in a work session or under maybe some leadership from the mayor to really talk about how serious this potential is, and then also what we would do if we were faced with it. I'm assuming that we won't be, but it seems like the best time to prepare for disaster is not while you're in it. So thanks so much.
Thank you, Mr. Birch, Chamber of Commerce.
Yeah, I'd report that the Chamber Board did meet last week, and there's a significant discussion regarding the potential for revisions to the tax cap that have been under discussion for some time by Chamber Committee, and there'll be a recommendation forthcoming here probably in the next few weeks. Would note that Sharon Weddleton has been very helpful and has participated in that committee effort, and will keep the body apprised, but suffice it to say there's some concern, certainly in the business community, regarding the increase in property taxes as it has affected Anchorage property owners. Thank you.
Ms. Gray-Jackson, Budget and Finance Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to again thank my colleagues for following the process throughout this updated 2009 budget. Thank you very much. Last Thursday, the Budget and Finance Committee met, and we basically met to go over outstanding budget amendments. And at the end of that meeting, the committee approved the distribution of available funds to Project Access, Campfire, DEP, Arts, and the library, which we will address later on during the budget debate. Also, the Budget Advisory Commission member Dan attended the meeting, and he discussed with the committee the Budget Advisory Commission's report to the Assembly, which is on the agenda tonight. We'll hear from them a little later. And I just want to let everyone know that I will probably cancel the December 18th meeting, which is our next scheduled meeting. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Gray-Jackson. Mr. Gutierrez, Public Safety.
No report, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Starr.
Yeah, the Audit Committee has a meeting scheduled for Monday, and we're going to revisit some of the topics that related to the authorization for Mr. Raskams to start his investigation. We'll start to see some information come in. We have an hour and a half set aside, so we'll be taking some input from Mr. Raskams about his findings, whether that's a complete report or not. We don't want to pressure him, but there is some findings to bring forth, and we will have that discussion on Monday along with the other couple housekeeping items. So that's 1 o'clock on Monday, the first
In City Hall.
First floor.
Okay. Thank you. Next is the addendum to the agenda. Are there, first, I know there's at least one laid on the table item from Mr. Coffey. Oh, yeah, go ahead, Mr. Birch. Sorry.
Yeah, just what is the status of the financial report that I requested perhaps 1 month ago regarding the financial impact of the labor contract changes that were applied to the public safety employees in the police department? No, maybe through the chair.
I'm not sure if that's for Mr. Starr, whether that's for Ms. Weddleton.
We had a request about a month ago, 3 weeks ago, something of that nature, for specifically for the financial terms associated with several dozen modifications, labor contract modifications, and I guess I would like to have that information sooner rather than later, and I just was looking for an update.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Birch, as I responded to your email earlier today, that was discussed at the Audit Committee process. There was not a committee agreement that would be accomplished at this time. The committee and the internal auditor, I believe, are moving forward as directed by the Assembly resolution. If at that time the committee directs the administration or the internal auditor to do further work on that, then we'll be more than happy to move forward on it.
Through the chair, it does not seem unreasonable to me if you're going to execute a significant change to a labor contract that you would have, at least in your hip pocket, some assessment of what the financial impact on the taxpayers and the public would be.
Mr. Abbott?
Is that a question?
It is.
And what is the question?
I find it unconscionable that you negotiate a significant change to a labor agreement and have not a clue as to how much the financial impact of that change is going to result in on the budget.
And I've never asserted, Mr. Birch, that analyses haven't been completed and the rest of that. I'm just simply following the direction from the committee, at which you're a member of, and the meeting of which you attended, and no such request was made by the committee at that time. So until and unless the committee makes such a request, that's not something we're working on right now. If at some point the committee makes such a request, we'll absolutely, either with the internal auditor's assistance or separately, we'll work on that.
Thanks. Okay. Next, we're on the addendum, but I see the mayor has joined us. Mr. Mayor, you have an opportunity to make a report. Would you like to make one?
Mr. Chairman, I have heard here.
Microphone, please.
There we go. Give me 1 second here. I want to make sure. Actually, you know what? I'm going to just hand this out. It's just a document I'm going to pass out. Never mind.
All right.
That's fine.
Thank you. Next is the addendum to the agenda. I'm familiar with one laid on the table item from Mr. Coffey. Do we have an AR number? I know it's item 9B4. All right. That would be that's Mr. Coffey's laid on the table item. Is there a second for that? Thank you. Any opposition to adding 9B4 to the addendum? Hearing and seeing none, I will read the addendum adding 9B4. First is item 9B4, AR 2008- number to be determined, a resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly stating its temporary non-objection to transfer of location of a no-premises package store license owned by current ABC-approved licensee TCCH Incorporated to the location of 1901 West Diamond Boulevard, currently owned and operated by licensee TCCH Incorporated as Diamond Liquors. Item 9D3, Assembly Memorandum AM 807-2008, sole source purchase from Turbocair Incorporated to furnish a refurbished turbine rotor and compressor diaphragms per turbine unit number 5 to the Municipality of Anchorage Municipal Light and Power, $3,471,000. Purchasing. Item 9E3, Information Memorandum AIM 95-2008. Budget Advisory Commission report on the proposed 2009 updated budget, Office of Management and Budget. Item 9F11, Resolution Number AR 2008-293, a resolution of the Municipality of Anchorage appropriating $93,708 to the Federal Grants Fund 241 as a grant from the U.S. Department of Transportation, Section 5317, New Freedom Grant Program, and $5,428 of transit revenues to Area-Wide General Fund 101 in contribution to this amount, and the amount of $23,427 to the Federal Grants Fund 241 to assist in the funding of coordinated transportation services beyond ADA requirements within the Municipality of Anchorage Public Transportation Department. Public hearing set for December 16, 2008, accompanied by Assembly Memorandum AM 806-2008. Is there a motion to incorporate the addendum?
Move to incorporate.
And a second.
Okay.
We're almost there.
Can't get logged in.
We're getting close. Can we clear the board from the...
Why don't you let somebody else do it? I'm having trouble getting logged
Well,
in.
actually, no one can get on right now,
Oh, is that what the deal is?
so be patient. Well, let's just do it orally, and then we'll move forward.
Move to incorporate.
Is there a second? Moved by Dr. Selcraig, seconded by Ms. Johnston. Any opposition to incorporation of the addendum? Hearing and seeing none, the addendum is incorporated. That brings us now to the consent agenda, and I will start today on my right. Mr. Starr, any items to pull?
No items.
Thank you. Mr. Gutierrez, any items?
No, sir.
Ms. Gray Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Sorry about that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to pull 9 elephant 3.
Thank you. Anything else?
No, thank you.
Mr. Birch.
9B3.
Bravo 3.
Correct.
I have no item. Anything else? I have no items to pull. Dr. Selcraig.
On the addendum, 9D3.
Delta 3, thank you. Anything else? Anything else, Dr. Selcraig?
No, thank you.
Ms. Drummond.
Nothing, sir. Thank you.
Ms. Osiander. Mr. Flynn.
Nothing, thank you.
Ms. Johnston.
Nothing, thank you.
And Mr. Coffey. Any items to pull? All right, hearing nothing from Mr. Coffey, we assume he has no items to pull. All right. Other than the...
Mr. Chair?
I'm sorry, administration, any items to pull? Thank you, Ms. Handyside. Thank you for reminding me.
9F10, please.
All right. Mr. Coffey, are you with us again? Maybe not. All right. Other than the pulled items, is there any opposition to approval of the consent agenda? Hearing and seeing none, the consent agenda is approved unanimously. That brings us first to item 9, Bravo 3. Mr. Birch.
Move to approve.
Go ahead, Mr. Birch.
The question I had is, and I apologize for not getting to this earlier, but this is it uses, it references the Connect Arm Crossing, but it relates to funding for a conference that, as I understand it, happened last year or last summer. It seems like it's after the fact, I guess.
Anyone from the administration want to respond to that?
I can respond.
Oh, yeah,
Through the
Ms.
chair,
Michael,
yes.
thank you.
Yes, this is a conference that did occur, and this was an agreement with the State of Alaska Historic Preservation Office, and we're just now appropriating the dollars for it.
So this is basically an after the fact. I guess it seems to me like you would want to do that ahead of time, I guess, is all.
Yes, and I apologize for the order of things. We were in transition. We had a new historic preservation officer. We had one leave, a new one come in, and so we had a little bit of a transitional error with this particular event.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Osiander.
I sent in a question on this. Is it necessary to be trained in New Orleans to be a historic officer, historic identification property officer? I guess I'm confused what the
Through the Chair,
purpose.
Ms. Osiander, part of our Historic Preservation Commission requires that we have a staff to staff that particular commission with background in historic preservation. Unfortunately, it's an unfunded mandate, and we've been providing that through my office. And so in order to at least make every effort to meet the requirements of the commission's position, I think it is necessary for this person to be trained in the area of historic preservation.
Does that answer your question, Ms. Osiander? I'm sorry.
Yes.
I couldn't see your wood coast. All right. Seeing no one else in the queue, I'll ask if there's any opposition to approval of item 9, Bravo 3. We should put it on the board. Ms. Osiander's going to. All right. Well, it's coming on the board. A yes vote approves 9B3 and no vote does not. Please vote.
Mr. Coffey?
All right. We'll note Mr. Coffey abstaining. And that passes by a vote of 8-2. That brings us next to item 9, Delta 3, Dr. Selkrig.
I just wanted to ask.
Hold on, wait. You need to move.
Move to approve.
Thank you.
And I had a few
And
questions.
we need a second first. Thank you. All right, go ahead, Dr. Selkrig.
Mr. Posey, would you come on up? I just wanted to ask you a couple questions about this.
Dr. Selkrig, hit first motion. Thank you. And Ms. Johnston, thank you. Go ahead, Dr. Selkrig.
You made reference to compressors and at our work session 2 weeks ago, and I just wanted to hear a little bit about, you mentioned that there had been some challenges with them, and I just wanted to kind of put on record what kind of challenges we've had with these.
Through the chair, Ms. Selkrig.
Just remind us who you are, even though we know. We want to make a clear record.
Jim Posey, Municipal Light and Power, through the chair. The compressors, actually the turbines that we have here that we're replacing, these units are 35, 40 years old, and when they come up for their 5 to 8 year rotation on replacement, buying refurbished original equipment is very important to us because we haven't had good luck buying non-OEM.
Okay.
And keeping them maintained is a big piece of what we have to do till we buy additional new turbines that are 30% more efficient than these old units. But we have to do this while we wait for the purchase of the new ones later.
So this is just kind of a bridge to the next generation that we're getting.
This is a bridge, Ms. Selkrig, that I felt that for 5 to 10 years we have to have this running until we get a new generation built at Plant 2 to replace some of the old units.
Okay, thank you very much.
I see no one else in the queue. I'll ask if there's any opposition to approval of item 9, Delta 3. Hearing and seeing none, that is approved unanimously. That brings us next to 9, Echo 3, Ms. Gray-Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Move to accept.
Second.
Hit first motion, please.
Yeah.
And Ms. Osiander, second. Thank you very much. All right, go ahead, Ms. Gray-Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to first off thank the Budget Advisory Commission publicly for doing a fine job working with me as the new Assembly Budget and Finance Committee Chair. I really appreciate all of your hard work, and so much so that I'd like to invite whoever would like to talk to come up to the podium and talk to the Assembly about your report and the public. And I'd also like to name Jason, who's here from the Budget Advisory Commission, Heather Island, who's here, Tony Cange, and also Dan. So 4 members are here this evening. Welcome.
Thank you for coming down. We'll give you an opportunity if you want to speak to the work you've done, and certainly here to be prepared to answer questions the Assembly may have.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, my name is Jason Bergerson. I'm the chair of the Budget Advisory Commission. Ms. Gray-Jackson has already introduced the members that we have tonight. I want to pass over to Heather to review one of the 2 items that we put together this year. The first was our required report to the Assembly in accordance with Municipal Code 4.50.030. The second is a recommendation report that Dan Dickinson will speak to. So I'll pass it over to Heather.
So as required by Anchorage Municipal Code...
Just remind us of who you are.
Oh, Heather Ireland, I'm the Vice Chair of the Budget Advisory Commission. And as required by Anchorage Municipal Code 4.50.030, the Budget Advisory Commission has reviewed the Municipality of Anchorage's proposed updated biennial operating budget for fiscal year 2009. The BAC believes that the administration has articulated through the proposed 2009 general government operating budget of $435,302,640 the means by which the community's needs can best be met within the limitations of the municipality. The BAC has determined the proposed 2009 general government operating budget requests are appropriate to meet the most critical needs, although the BAC acknowledges that there remain unmet needs within the community. The BAC believes that the administration, the Assembly, the Budget Advisory Commission, and other citizens should be ever vigilant in review of the operations of our municipal government, and the BAC will continue to review and present the Assembly and administration with additional recommendations as they are developed. And we met last Wednesday, November 19th, and unanimously approved this resolution. And so in addition to this report, we also, because by code we're supposed to deal with the process, the budget process, and Mr. Dickinson is going to speak to that.
But before you leave, I see Mr. Birch is in the queue with a question. I assume that's for Ms. You want to wait? Okay, that's fine.
Thanks.
I'll keep you in the queue. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Dan Dickinson. I'm a member of the Commission. There's a longer report. It's in your packet. I'm not going to read the whole thing. Briefly, we had 4 recommendations about process. The first one was that there seemed to be still room for improvement in the public input in the capital budget process. The second one, which really affects the other 3, are since we're making recommendations that all sort of involve extra efforts, we believe that extra resources may be necessary to make the budget process more open and available to other citizens. The third one really focuses on the budget review, overview, and resources section. If you look at the Blue Book, many, many pages, lots of numbers in there, but I think for a lot of people, they spend most of their time looking about the first 6 pages, and so we had a number of recommendations to try to make those pages more accessible. And probably the 2 biggest ones have to do with the fact that we think information from the school district, in other words, everything that's going to go into a taxpayer that a taxpayer is going to have to deal with should be there. So it's going to require going outside silos and all those kinds of things. But I think that's very important. It's already, when the bill goes out from the city, that information is in there. And I think it should be in the budgetary material as well. And maybe, we'd recommend to the school district as well that they think about having that all. So when people go to look at the budget, it's all there. They don't see a piece of it and they get told, oh yeah, and there's this other piece over here. There were some recommendations about how to work some of the documentation internally, and I just want to say that we've had excellent conversations with the staff at OMB, with the chair of the Budget and Finance Committee about how to do that, and I really look forward. I think they're very receptive to a lot of the ideas, and I think the next budget, I hope, will be clear to folks who go to look at it. There's one specific concern we had about the way property tax relief is presented. We think that it's a complex issue, so when you try to sum it up on one page, it's always hard. But we had some ideas that we think would make that better. And the fourth recommendation really deals with the biennial budget process. I think that there's a lot of, we understand some of the reasons for that and for the savings. Our concern is that the code didn't necessarily follow, so some of the information that's presented sort of it was really left over from the days when it was a budget year-to-year cycle, and so some of the comparisons that people might want to see aren't there, and we think that would be an improvement, and we'll get back to you if a code revision is appropriate, because what is set forth in the budget is a requirement of code. So that, Mr. Chairman, are the 4 recommendations we had, and I just want to emphasize that it's a good presentation. We think it's a very good presentation, and all we're saying is we think it could be made even better. So thank you.
Thank you. We do have questions, and I will let the people asking questions ask who they want to answer. Mr. Birch.
Thank you. Thank you for your effort. I guess one of the things, we live in some very extraordinary economic times, and I guess I attended the Resource Development Council meeting last week. We're looking at oil prices at $20 20 years ago or even 10 years ago, they would have looked pretty good. But we are driven, in large part, our budget's driven by state revenue sharing and the potential for that. Did you take a look at what options are there as far as force ranking the budget? In other words, if we need to, trim, 5 or 10% out of that budget, do you look at, do you force rank or prioritize any of the municipal activities? Or I guess I'm trying to figure out how, what level of detail you provide your review on.
Yeah,
I look like you get the question.
Yeah. We talked a little bit about oil prices, one in relation to the fuel costs, which was sort of a moving target during this budget process, and then also, especially as it relates to capital and state revenue sharing, of how the low oil prices are going to impact the money that we're getting from the state. And so it's sort of a balance that's going on with the budget. We didn't get into the detail of priorities as you talked about, but that was, I think, to the extent that we talked about oil, but recognizing that there might come a time when we need to, as a community, look at where we need to prioritize our limited funds.
Thank you. I would just add that I'm deeply concerned about locking us into 5-year labor contracts, for instance, where we don't really have an out, and looking at what's happened in General Motors and some at kind of a national level where you get these contracts that you're really tied down to. I guess my view would be that we would look forward to coming back to you and getting some guidance on not only priorities but also alternatives and ways that we can reduce the impact on the taxpayer. Because right now the property taxpayer is basically picking up the load, and that's what concerns me, and that's the feedback I'm getting from my constituents.
And of course, the next year we hope to look at our revenue sources and how those can maybe be evaluated, and then also you communicator have more of a face of with the public, and we don't at this time, but I think more public involvement needs to go into this budget process so we as a community can recognize our priorities.
Great. Thank you. Yeah. And thank you for your contributions.
Yeah.
Ms. Gray-Jackson, you had a...
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to thank Mr. Birch for his concerns, but I'd also like to remind this body that the 2009 budget was approved by the previous Assembly last year, and this is just an updated budget with some revisions, but I can guarantee you that I will work diligently with the Budget Advisory Commission when we dig into the biennial budget that's coming up for years 2010 and 2011. Thank you.
Mr. Starr.
Yeah, thank you for those comments, although it is a different day, I think, with the stock market being at record lows. So, 18 months ago, I believe that's a fair estimation. But, Mr. Dickinson, on your 3D recommendations about how we reflect property tax relief in particular is how you have it, and your statement is to move it to the first page. I have two questions for you. One of them is that you're seeming to, by that statement, confirm that we've got that sort of in hand. And we had this discussion last year. One of the things that transpired was that PERS and TERS now is a set legislative action by the state. We know the number, if you will. In this one, where we have the 15.6 dialed in, your recommendation is to move that to a more visible and apparently a more sure thing. I have two questions. If we don't, the property taxes are going to be on the hook for about $250 million. And your suggestion here is what? I'm unclear as to what. Two questions. What if we don't get the state contribution? It goes with Mr. Birch's keepings. How do we address that? And then the second one is, what do you got in mind with how we reflect the 15.6?
Mr. Starr, through the chair, actually our concern was precisely the concern that you talked about. If you look at the way the presentation is on, I believe it's page 2, fairly far up front, it appears as if there were no property tax relief. It wouldn't change the property tax burden. In other words, what is presented there is, here's how much is coming from property taxes, and it's presented as a number as if there were no credits applied. And then there's another slice of the pie, which is the dollars that are coming in from the state. So it looks like you could just remove that slice of the pie, and the property taxes would not be affected. Mm-hmm. What we were driving at is the notion that you would show property taxes, and you identify a piece that was in there as relief. So if it didn't show up from the state, and clearly folks are talking about, this next year's budget is going to look a lot different than last year's budget for the state. you would see the effect would have to be either costs would have to be cut or property taxes would rise. And it's our belief that the way it's presented now, it doesn't appear that those become your choices.
I believe you're right. So in Mr. Birch's statement on prioritization, is the committee ready to revisit if we don't get the 15.6 at first quarter budget, or is your recommendation just to adjust the mill? What do you think you guys have in mind on that?
Mr. Shaw, through the chair, we certainly did, as Heather said, we haven't done that work, and if there is some readjustment needed, we'd be willing to assist you in the public hearings or anything that occurs, but no, it's not something that we've looked at, and clearly there'll be a lot of opinions about what's the next step.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Flynn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Real simple question by show of hands. How many of you can we count on being here to do this again next year? Very good. You must have treated them well, Ms. Gray Jackson. Thank you.
Anything else, Mr. Flynn? All right, Ms. Gray Jackson.
I'll pass, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Selcraig.
This is to Ms. Ireland. You made reference to you were actually prepared to, like next year, address the revenue sources. What did you have in mind? What were you alluding to?
I'm not saying next year, next budget process, but we as a commission meet monthly, and we don't feel like our work is done by submitting this report. Our work is done on the 2009 budget, but we also get the quarterly reports and things like that. There's been at least one member who's been interested in the discussion about sales tax and other possible revenue-generating options within the
So assuming you're meeting quarterly, would it be...
No, we're meeting monthly.
Monthly, rather. Would it be possible for you to begin to put some focus on your recommendations of how we would proceed if we didn't get the revenue sharing from the state? I think what you're hearing from this body is that we recognize that the state is going to be in a different position than it was last year, and it would be nice to be proactive in terms of understanding what we would do if we find ourselves short of that cash.
Yeah, and I think as a group, we are interested in being more engaged in the process throughout the year, not just at the beginning of September or the end of September when the budget was presented to you, but as it's being developed, especially like Ms. Gray Jackson mentioned, that the next year will be a whole new biennial budget cycle, and so we hope to, in the meantime, be generating more public interest and input into the budget process, including those priorities.
Well, I'd certainly appreciate it if the Commission would take the time each meeting to kind of spend a little bit of time talking about, well, what if we don't get what we intended on? What would be some scenarios to move to the next step and work not to have our citizens hit by such large tax bills? So thanks very much.
Thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Drummond.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks to all of you. I know it's hard work. What I'd like to say is that there is an opportunity coming up to address the entire municipality's budget through the transition process of the new mayor. We haven't had a transition in 5.5 years, but as I recall, the transition teams are set up by departmental areas, and I think that would be a prime opportunity to begin to look at the budget well in advance of September with lots and lots of eyes looking at it who are very interested in getting to know this budget and know what the opportunities are before the new mayor takes over and have an outlook on the budget that would, between the election and the 1st of July when the new mayor gets sworn in. As the school district learned a number of years ago, having lots and lots of community eyes looking in on the budget, dividing it up into manageable portions, ends up with lots and lots of good suggestions coming from the public with lots of buy-in from the public. So I hope that we could look into that, and if this body needs to make that suggestion to the incoming administration, I think that would be real helpful to the community. So thanks a lot.
Thank you. Ms. Osiander.
I'll join in the thanks. I particularly appreciate the specific advice on how to do this more clearly and openly. I would like, if I could, a little clarification on item 1 there about the capital budget. What was the thinking? Is it I do have an ulterior motive for asking.
Ms. Osiander, through the chair. Again, my name is Jason Bergerson. This was kind of my item for the report. My view is that through the community councils and through the Federation of Community Councils, there's a great opportunity to provide more public input forums with PM&E and OMB in prioritizing community projects and getting together regionally so that road projects don't get prioritized in one council, recommended for deletion in another, and the continuation of the road is recommended again in the third council. We need to unify some of these. It'll make Jim's job a little easier. It'll make the rest of the staff's job a little easier if we can put more of that together and do it with more community input.
Okay, so it's more about how the CIP is prioritized.
Yes.
Okay. Not about what the operations and maintenance on bonds. That wasn't the topic necessarily.
No, focus more on process.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I see no one else in the queue. And so I will also thank, on behalf of the entire Assembly, thank you for all your hard work and diligence at looking at all these items and taking time to meet with members of departments, members of the Budget Finance Committee, and coming down tonight. So thank you very much. That brings us next to, oh, that's right. Is there any opposition to accepting this report? Hearing and seeing none, that is accepted. Thank you, Madam Clerk. That brings us the last pulled item on the consent agenda, item 9F10, pulled by the administration. Ms. Handyside or Mr. Abbott?
Yes, Mr. Chair, there's no longer a requirement for a public hearing.
Hold on, wait. We need a motion.
Oh, I'm sorry.
We need a motion to
So done.
Actually, go ahead, Ms. Handyside. Speak first, and then we will make a motion, make the appropriate motion.
Okay.
Explain, and then we'll get a motion from somebody.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. AWWU was able to secure affidavits from all of the affected parties stating their non-opposition to this particular project, thus no longer requiring a public hearing. So we propose moving this item from 9F10 possibly to 9B5.
5, that's correct. So the next thing, and I think the administration actually can make the motion. Does the administration want to make a motion, move it to 9B? Is there a second move into 9B5? Actually, if somebody in the administration push first motion. They can't. All right.
You've never allowed this
that
machine to do that.
Dr. Selcraig has moved for you. And we've got that.
Okay.
And we need a second to move it to 9B5. Ms. Osiander, thank you. Mr. Starr's in the queue. Go ahead, Mr. Starr. I think the administration has explained what's going on. Go ahead, Mr. Starr.
It's all easy business, I guess, because HLB is here and the school district. What I am recollecting on the connection for this was that the requirement for this connection from the school district side of the business was part of the high school construction out there, and they were forced through the high school process to extend the water main to the end of their property. Is that what this is doing? And if so, why wouldn't we just have them write us a check now?
Hold on, wait. Actually, the clerk has noted, Mr. Starr, that the pending motion is whether we should move it to 9B5, which is really not going to the merits of it.
Well, isn't that back on the consent agenda for immediate action, however?
It would be, but we would take up the debate on it after we've moved it to 9B5, because under 9F10, it would actually be set for a public hearing. But because this motion is to take it off of public hearing and have us decide tonight.
How did you secure approval from the school district, then, is my question?
I'll have Mr. Primo answer that. Oh, Kurt Voss.
And we certainly can debate the merits, but this is about whether we should move it from public hearing item when people can appear to a item on the consent agenda where we approve it without a public hearing. Go ahead, Mr. Voss, and let us know your name, please.
Through the chair, Mr. Starr, this is a separate project. This is the Highland Intertie project. The project that you're referring to with the school district actually runs down Yosemite Drive at a different location than the one before on this action.
The question again is who from the school district signed off on the approval to move it to consent agenda item without a public hearing?
Through the chair, there is we have a waiver, affidavit waiver signed by Mr. Primo. Do you have the affidavit?
Mr. Starr, is it?
Yeah, I beg to differ.
Do you want to take a look at the affidavits before we act?
Perhaps. I guess I'd like to flesh the topic out because of the nature of the discussion, to just have it move on a consent agenda item without ASD here to hold up their side of that agreement. There are some questions about the development requirements for this area, and I just as soon have a discussion about it. If the chair thinks we can do it at the time we approve the consent agenda, that'd be great, but there's nobody from the school district to back up what's said here.
Well, we actually have already approved the consent agenda, and so this is an item that's been pulled, and so it's actually, it's appropriate for debate. We could also, the first question is, do we move it to the 9B5? And if we move it to 9B5, then we could vote to postpone action or not postpone action. I think that a lot of your questions go, should we approve it in light of the question? So I would actually ask, first, should we move it? And so I'd ask if there's any opposition to moving it to 9B5.
Let me hear the answer to who signed the affidavit first.
Right, that's fine. Go ahead.
Through the chair, the signature is George Vikalis.
Okay.
All right. I will ask if there's any opposition to moving it to 9B5. This doesn't mean we've decided it.
We'll move it to 9B5 is fine.
All right. Hearing and seeing no opposition, this is now 9B5. The next thing would be, appropriate thing would be a move to approve so that we can discuss it. There's such a motion. Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by, looks like Ms. Gray Jackson got there first. Thank you. Okay. Now, Mr. Birch. I mean, not Mr. Birch, Mr. Starr. I apologize.
Again, what's the urgency to have them sign off on it in this, and why wouldn't we want them to come and speak to the development interest for that area? There's two concerns I have, and if the parcel is directly across the street from the high school, I thought it was HLB owned land with the authority for the operation of that lands was given to ASD, which is not the same as ownership. So I'm a little flummoxed as to what we're doing here, because I didn't realize that ASD owned the property across the street that you're saying you're going to tax them. If what I heard you say was it's not the high school property, it's the one across the street for the water line going to the dump.
Yeah, through the chair, Mr. Starr. This particular project is an AWW capital project, which is an intertype project. The portion of one of the lots on the roll is on the tax records. The responsible owner is the Anchorage School District. We are only looking at that one single lot. There is a separate project that involves the school district where there is a separate water main and sewer extension that is being extended across and by ASD controlled property, which is a subject of a different action and a different project. So in this particular case, for this action, we are using what we always use in terms of ownership interest in setting the notice to the parties for this role.
Isn't this construction going to go across the street and hook up to what you just said? I mean, when you talk about it as a different project, it's the main line ends right at their property. Is that what I understand?
Yeah, this particular project that is the subject matter here,
right here,
for which the map is shown, connects to an existing main already in place, and this project would be added onto later in a separate project that affects the school district. So that's a different matter. This particular intertie only crosses over and connects to an existing water main as shown on the map.
Okay. Thank you.
Anyone else? I see no one else in the queue. So I will ask if there is any opposition to approval of item 9, Bravo 5. Hearing and seeing none, that is approved unanimously. That brings us to the end of the consent agenda. And a question for the clerk. Can we proceed on budget items until 6 o'clock since it is before 6?
Yes, we can.
Okay.
Because the public hearing is closed.
Okay. So that brings us, we are on 11A, which is the operating budget. If we need to take a moment to make sure we have our budget papers, it'll take about 1 minute to make sure we're organized. If memory serves me correctly, and I'm looking, I believe the last item that was in front of us would be Star Amendment number 5, which had to do with the Community Services Authority, or Cooperative Services Authority.
Right, through the chair, Madam Clerk, the one amendment I moved for deleting contraceptive purposes or contraceptives paid by the city, that one failed. Is that what I recollect? Because I don't remember voting on it.
Yes, we did vote and it failed.
That was the $25,000 one. What was the number on that? I guess I'm missing a number 6, but
I think that was Star number 6.
Okay, there you go. That's the answer I needed. So we failed that one, and here's one that actually I'm going to move to remove my motion. I don't want to move this at this time, but I'd like to speak to the reasons why.
That's 9. That's Star number 6, which had to do with reducing funding in connection with the Cooperative Services Authority. Go ahead, Mr. Starr.
Well, for clarity, Star Amendment number 5 actually does propose to reduce the city budget by $250,000. There's a pending item later on in the agenda tonight which talks about dissolving that CSA entity. And I guess the reason I'd like to withdraw this amendment is to speak to perhaps a larger package. Granted, it does hinge on the action to dissolve that, but in speaking with the administration, I believe that it's prudent to have them bring that forth. I'll also mind that there is no capital budget or operating budget tendered for CSA at this time, so it's entirely possible that we just won't appropriate any money either. So in that capacity, I'd like to let the dust settle on that. Let's see if there's a need to move a capital operating budget, and also weigh in on the action item for later on this evening, which we talk about as a body, the need to dissolve that. So I'd like to just withdraw this, set it aside, wait for the administration's packet to handle the budget. So
I'll ask if there is any opposition to Mr. Starr's request to remove Star number 7, which relates to CSA, Star number 5 relating to CSA. Hearing and seeing none, that item is withdrawn. I believe of the submitted amendments, that gets us finished with all of Mr. Starr's proposed amendments.
On the operating, correct?
On the operating, right. We're on the operating budget only. I think next, why don't we take up, because it happens to be what's on top of my stack, there's a Budget and Finance Committee proposed amendment, and I defer to Ms. Gray-Jackson on that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I mentioned earlier, the Budget and Finance Committee met last Thursday, and I'm about to move an amendment that was approved by the entire committee. Therefore, I move to amend AO 2008-102S on page 6 of 8, lines 108 through 112 to read as follows. And I think that everybody has a copy of this. And if you'd like for me to go through the line items, Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to do so.
I don't think you need to yet. I would just ask the body, does everybody have in front of them the one-page sheet that reflects 5 budget items? Does anybody not have it?
Was it on our table tonight?
Yes, it was laid on the table tonight. Let's give everybody a minute to find it. She's got, okay, does everybody have this in front of them? All right, does anybody need Ms. Gray-Jackson to go through line by line? Go ahead, Mr. Coffey. Go ahead, Ms. Gray-Jackson. Okay. Ms. Gray-Jackson, if you could go through and also explain, as to these 5 items, what it was in the current S version and what it is in the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Line 108, funding for project access. In the S version, I believe it was $25,000. Mr. Chairman, can you give me a moment, please, so I can look at the S version?
Sure.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm ready now. In the S version, project access funding was $40,000. My amendment brings that amount to $50,000. 50. The total amount that would be appropriated to project access is $75,000 because there's already $25,000 in the administration's budget, the original one. Can I continue?
Yes, please.
Thank you. On line 109, funding for the DEP program, dental work, hearing aids, eyeglasses, and prescriptions. In the S version, that amount was $25,000, and my amendment, it's $20,000. Line 110, which is one moment, please. Thank you. Funding for Campfire USA. In the S version, it was $25,000. My amendment takes that amount to $50,000. Line 111, Library Community Plan. In the S version, that funding was $60,000. The S version takes that down to $40,000. Line 112, in the S version, that amount was $50,000. My amendment would take that amount down to $40,000. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And the last item.
Was that the arts?
Arts and Cultural Foundation. Yes, Mr. Coffey.
Thank you. And then do the other amendments relative to the planning department and so on, do they continue?
Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead, Ms. Gray Jackson.
My amendment addresses line items 109 through 112 only. Thank you. I'm sorry, 108 through 112.
And Mr. Coffey, in answer to your question, because there's no amendment being made to the $75,000 to the planning and $25,000 to the Performing Arts Center, that maintains the status quo on those two items in the S version.
You're welcome.
Okay. Ms. Osiander, go ahead.
Actually, I have several questions.
Okay.
It appears the first item is increasing the project asset access, but as I heard correctly, the other items are substituting. So, for instance, project access, I believe, went from 25, and you're adding 50 to bring the total to 75.
Correct.
But the DEEP program went from 25 to 20.
Correct.
So some of them are additions, and some of them are substitutions. That's what's confusing me. It's not clear which is which. The other thing that a little bit confuses me is we had $200,000 in there that was the room to move, and I thought that was already incorporated. Is this then an additional $200,000?
Ms. Gray Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Osiander, this is a substitute for what's in the S version, and the total dollar amount is still $200,000. It's just that the dollar amounts were revised based on and it's shown in my proposed amendment to 2008-102S.
Okay,
Thank you.
give me a little more so I'm sure I got it. Some of the items in the S version, though, came out of that $200,000 and they're still there.
They are still there, Ms. Osiander, but the amounts differ.
Okay, what would help me then,
Mr. Mayor, use your microphone next time.
no, I heard him.
I know, but we need to make a record.
Okay, he said it's the same $200,000, it's just been realigned. And as such, I'm a little bit I'm unclear what's gone. I heard the $5,000 is gone from the DEEP.
Right.
But what else is gone to make up the supplementals?
Ms. Gray Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the Campfire dollar amount, it was $25,000, that was increased. Funding for the library used to be $60,000, so it's now $40,000, which means that $20,000 is gone and put somewhere else. For the funding for the arts, used to be $50,000, now $10,000 is gone and put somewhere else. Amongst these five line items.
I'm sorry, I'm slow. It would help me if I saw a direct reduction to know where the funding is coming from.
Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead, Ms. Gray.
Can I try and help here a little bit more?
Thanks.
Ms. Osiander, if you look at line item 108, that amount was $40,000 originally.
All right.
Okay?
I'm putting it down.
Okay. If you look at the next line item, 109, that was $25,000.
Okay.
If you look at the next line item, 110, that was $25,000. If you look at line item 111, that was $60,000. If you look at line item 112, that was 50,000. Okay, so if you write those numbers down, I think it might be helpful for you. And the total amount adds up to $200.
$200,000.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. $200,000. So what virtually happened was Project Access got more funding. The DEP program got $5,000 less. Campfire got $25,000 more. The library community plan got $10,000 less. The arts fund, I'm sorry, $20,000 less. And the arts funding, they got $10,000 less.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I do have one additional question.
Okay,
though.
go ahead.
The planning position that went in and was funded by the month delay in bringing new police officers on, that's still in here.
Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead, Ms. Gray-Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Osiander, the amendments that are before you have nothing to do with the planning position, and the $100,000 by starting the academy a month later, or the $25,000 for the packet. That's the reason why I presented my amendment in this order, so that it would hopefully be clear that this is all that we're dealing with in this amendment.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Does that answer your question?
I've got my questions answered. I know how I want to vote.
Okay. Anyone else in the queue? And Mr. Coffey, of course, if you want to be heard on these, you better speak up because you can't be on the board.
And
Dr. Selkirk, go ahead. Oh, sorry.
Can I explain my vote before we vote?
Yes, why don't you put yourself back in the queue? I just called on Dr. Selkirk. Go ahead, Dr. Selkirk.
I'm going to be supporting these amendments. I think it was really hard for us to figure out what our priorities were. We didn't have a lot of money, recognizing the fact that the budget is very tight this year, and we've worked hard to keep it within the guidelines of where we were last year and actually try to save some money. So we basically had $200,000 that we found elsewhere in the budget to allocate. I think that our priorities are really focused on health care, which is critical. We're also focused on children, which is critical. But we haven't left out those other needs that have to do with the arts and the library. So one of the things I'm hoping we'll do, that I'm hoping that things will look better in the fourth quarter and the first quarter budget revision, and that we can come back and revisit some of these things. But for now, I think that this is a good compromise and will serve the community well. So I'll be supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Osiander, go ahead.
I have concerns about this, and my concern is that my higher priority would be to keep the new police officers coming in at the right timing, and also deal with the new planning position and the Performing Arts Center $25,000 request. So to do that, I need to find $100,000. That would bring the police officers back to the original hire schedule, as I understand it. And it would then allow for us to do the planning position and the Performing Arts Center. And so at this time, the only way I could see to find my $100,000 is out of this $200,000, which you're referencing in your amendment. And as such, I am going to move to amend the Budget Committee amendment, since it's for $200,000, and reduce it by half to $100,000. And since I didn't see this earlier, I'm kind of doing this at the seat of my pants. I apologize. Yes, Ms. Gray-Jackson, to respond.
Okay, but hold on. The first point is second. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. And Ms. Osiander, I would just note that your motion is to reduce the amendment from $200,000 to $100,000, and I recognize if the motion to reduce passes, we'll next address how to allocate it.
Fine, thank you.
I think that we can vote first on whether to reduce it,
Appreciate that.
and then we'll get into distribution if it passes.
Thank you.
Okay. As to it's been moved and seconded whether to reduce this by $100,000. I see. I don't see anyone. Oh, Ms. Osiander, click first motion, please.
I'm sorry, yes.
And Mr. Starr, second. Thank you both. Mr. Starr, if you want to, in the queue, go ahead and speak to this reduction.
As my previous night's goals was to try to lessen the burden on the property taxpayers, and that's where this is headed. I concur with the police goal as that, but I'm supportive of this because I believe it's heading the right direction. As we saw, there was a lot of needs. I saw a Campfire email that came in later after this even. This amendment doesn't speak to even half of what their outstanding needs were. So I think the summary I saw was $120,000 of remaining need. So, they're out there. I don't think we're going to meet them all with this budget. And I think that, programs need to be redesigned as we start to come into areas where we have less resources that we can tap into the property taxpayers for. So I'm going to support it. I think we ought to burden that and ask these program directors and designers to look at other funding sources. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Starr. I see no one else in the queue, so I know that this is not going to be a unanimous. I suspect it's not going to be an unanimous vote. Mr. Coffey is on the phone, so we'll be doing a roll call votes tonight. Madam Clerk, if you could call the motion. Yes. The motion is to reduce this budget amendment from $200,000 to $100,000. A yes vote would agree that this amount of additional funding should only be $100,000. And if it passes, then we'll address how it gets distributed. So a yes vote approves the reduction, and no vote keeps it at $200,000. And the clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Coffey.
Yes.
Ms. Johnston?
No.
Mr. Flynn?
No.
Ms. Osiander?
Yes.
Ms. Drummond?
No.
Dr. Selkirk?
No.
Mr. Klayman?
No.
Mr. Birch?
Yes.
Ms. Gray Jackson?
No.
Mr. Gutierrez?
No.
Mr. Starr?
Yes.
Chairman, that failed.
By a vote of 8-4, 7-4. Good thing I can count. All right. It's 6 o'clock. I'm willing to, because I want to get to the public appearance request, but I'm willing, is there any more discussion as to this reallocation at $200,000? I don't see anyone in the queue. And so, again, I will ask for a Ms. Osiander, actually, did you want to be heard further as to this amendment? No. All right. I will again call for a roll call vote as to this amendment. A yes vote will approve this amendment as set out, and a no vote would not approve it. If you could call the roll, Madam Clerk.
Mr. Starr?
No.
Mr. Gutierrez?
Yes.
Ms. Gray Jackson?
Yes.
Mr. Birch?
No.
Mr. Klayman?
Yes.
Dr. Selkirk? Yes. Ms. Drummond?
Yes.
Ms. Osiander?
No.
Mr. Flynn?
Yes.
Ms. Johnston?
Yes.
Mr. Coffey?
Mr. Coffey.
Sorry, no.
Thank you. That also passes by a vote of 7-4. All right. That's been now approved, and now what we're going to do is we will take a break from the budget, and we have 3 public appearance requests. And first public appearance request, we have Dee Bauman, Solid Waste Recycle Trash Program. Ms. Bauman, if you're here, please come down. Got a handout one handout you want us all to look at.
Actually, some pictures.
Okay. Go ahead. And let us know
Hello.
your name.
Thank you for allowing me to come tonight. I'm Rhea Bowman. I've spoken to many of you already on the pilot program going on with Alaska Solid Waste Trash Recycling Program. Under the old program, we would receive, for about $50 a quarter, 128 gallons a week. Under the new program, $53 a quarter buys us 48 gallons a week. If you are an Alaska Waste customer, you do even better than that. For me personally, this is a 316% increase. I was paying around 3 cents a gallon. Now I'm paying 12.5 cents. For an extra bag of trash, I would pay $1.50. Now I give 24 hours advance notice. I pay $12 for one bag. That's a 700% increase. Some of my neighbors need to have their trash picked up at the entrance to their home. They used to pay $9 a quarter. Now they pay $24 a quarter, whether they have trash picked up once a week or every other week. This will be even higher in April when costs go up. The result in my neighborhood is that the trash is piling up around houses. Some people are taking trash to family and friends outside this pilot area. Some are using dumpsters at work. And earlier this week, people came up and told me they were finding trash thrown in their driveway by someone that wasn't willing to take care of it themselves. This is a law for us. Those of us in solid waste have no choice. Those in Alaska Waste have the option to opt out of the service and take care of their own trash. Alaska Waste also offers many more varieties to individualize your program. As you look at the pictures that are coming around, this is one block of Castle Heights subdivision, a very short block. Only 4 homes in that area did not have their trash cans as visible as you are seeing in those pictures. Of those 4 homes, 2 of them I know are vacant. One is mine, and I have no record of the other one. When you see the final picture, you'll see my garage with my car and the trash cans. They are approximately the size of a subcompact car. That's why you're seeing them outside people's houses. There is a need in my household, if I go every other week, that I have a 3rd trash can because these new cans don't seal and the odor is oppressive. These cans are not bear-proof. I live in the Bear area. We will have a problem this spring with all these trash cans out there. I've talked to many people at Solid Waste in many phone calls, and it's costing them more to recycle than what it's bringing in funding. The recycling program is very limited. People who recycle are still going to the recycle stations with things that will not be picked up. You can't mark your cans, and if you live in Tudor and Boniface area, you know that we have windstorms about twice a year. These cans get blown all over. In the past, we would return them to our neighbors because they were marked. Now they cannot be marked.
Ms. Baumann, you've gone about 30 seconds over.
Thank
I'd give you about 20 or 30 seconds to wind up, and I see at least one question already, so you'll certainly have
That would be great. Thank you. Snow removal is difficult for many of your older citizens. Now, not in just removing the snow out of their driveways, they are supposed to remove snow around each cart, 3 feet around each cart. That's going to mean a major problem for some of our older citizens. I was on the receiving end the other day. I drove into the subdivision just as they were starting on this single block. And I think they were just starting, but I'm not sure. During the time I was there, they made 6 runs around the street. Normally, with the old system, there would have been 2, one up each side. This had 6 runs that I saw with 2 trucks. There are some other people here today that are also in support of this.
Ms. Baumann, you've got questions from at least 3 Assembly members, so I think you'll have more than enough opportunity to have your points be heard. Mr. Gutierrez, you've got a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I actually don't have a question of the speaker, but the argument I hear about marking the cans is interesting to me because I own a duplex, and my cans came marked with my address on them. So I'm wondering why, from the administration, why is it we can't do that for everyone else?
Mr. Gutierrez, through the chair, Mark Madden is here and could explain that if you'd like him to step up to the microphone.
Mr. Madden, actually, I guess what I would request, actually, because those are good questions, but I would suggest we try to focus our question on the speaker, and then we can follow up and ask questions from the administration. Unless there's a real desire to hear from the administration in the process, so she can also. Well, let's hear what Mr. Madden has to say first. Go ahead, Mr. Madden.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, we generally...
Microphone a little closer to you, please.
Okay. As far as the marking of the cans goes, because they basically are our cans and we give them to you for free, but people will be coming back. Yes, we do. We request that people don't paint them, but we have had a lot of people put other markings on them. Airport luggage tags work great. People have put different things on the handles. There is ways to mark your can besides great big numbers. Now, the other is every cart has a distinct and unique number of it, and it also has an RFID tag so that we can walk up to any cart with a little reader and know exactly not only the address that the cart came from, but the owner and quite a bit of information about the owner as well. So they are marked.
All right, go ahead, ma'am.
Comment?
Yes.
I called and asked that question. I was told the chip was in there. I was told that they would not return it to me if they discovered it was at the wrong address.
I don't believe that.
That is the word from solid waste to me.
Well, I'm the director, and we will return it.
That's great to hear. You could need to retrain your people a little bit. They're giving out information that's not correct.
Okay. Mr. Gutierrez, any other questions?
That's all I had, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Mr. Birch.
Again, seen a lot of email traffic regarding the size and just the difficulty some folks have in kind of wrestling those large cans. And it certainly was one of the concerns I had in not supporting this program as a mandate. In other words, I think voluntary recycling is wonderful. Yes. I think when the government gets in the business of compelling it and then writing a check to pay for it, I think it's trouble and it's costly to the taxpayer. But are you finding people having difficulty just negotiating the larger cans or the containers to the curbside?
Yes, among some. Your healthy young people are going to be able to get them down there. We haven't had a big snowfall yet. Wait till we're dealing with snow and trying to get it over berms and over driveways. It will be a problem for some of us.
Thank you. Thank you for coming down.
Dr. Selkirk.
I wanted to
follow
up on some of the things you mentioned. One is that you said that the solid waste services went around 6 times. You mean, were they having trouble getting those cans into their, why, did you notice why they would go around a neighborhood 6 times? I don't know.
The first time I saw them, I was just watching to see how the operation worked. And then I went in the house, looked out the window, and they came by again.
Were they picking up different cans and had
there were 2 trucks. One truck goes down and picks up trash. And then it comes to the other side. So that's 2 trips for that truck. The other truck will come down the opposite side and pick up the recycle, and then go down the other side. So I was ready for the 4. Then I looked out the window after those 4, and they're going again. So I saw at least 6 trips. I do not know why.
Okay, and then your other concern in terms of the photos is that there's not a location that people can actually store the large cans because of their size in terms of the room they take in the garage, and the fact that people don't have like screening that will cover them. Is that the point of the photos that you handed on?
The point of the photos is before this, or if you go down neighborhoods that aren't in this pilot program, you will not see that amount of trash outside. We have now made our neighborhood a dump.
Because there's no place, because the cans are so large and it's difficult to find.
The cans are large, they're not meeting the need. A lot of people aren't going to need a 96-gallon recycle, but they might need 96 gallons of trash. And when we come into summertime and we have the lawn debris, it's going to be even worse. Fall and spring, when you're cleaning up yards, there's a lot then. The holidays, there'll be a lot then.
Well, I will let you know that since I've been on the Assembly, I haven't gotten more calls about anything. This has been the biggest concern I've received calls with, and I brought it up early, and there was this sense that we needed to find out where the glitches were. My hunch is that there are things that we have to revisit and see if we can't make better. So thank you for your testimony.
I asked to be notified about this so that they would tell us and have some input. They told me that it was on the radio and the newspapers. And that was summer when a lot of us are not around Anchorage a lot. I did receive 2 postcards telling me to choose what size I wanted. When I asked why we didn't get a postcard to tell us that we were in this and to come in and talk about it before it happened, I was told it was too expensive. Yet, even though I'd already chosen my size, I received 2 postcards telling me to select a size.
One thing I think is important to know is that the price increase included the recycling, but it also addressed the long-term maintenance of the refuge site. And so we would have had increases whether we added recycling or not. All of that increase isn't associated with recycling.
Then it should be increases across the board to all Anchorage citizens, not just those of us in a pilot project. And right now, it's just the pilot project that are paying these 300% and 700% increases.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Don't go yet. Ms. Johnston has questions.
Yes, I was wondering, how did you handle your trash before this happened? And actually, two-part, and were you part of the Alaska Waste pilot program? Were you one that had their recycling program?
I'm in the solid waste
They did
area.
recycling in solid waste.
I knew nothing about that. My neighbors were very much into recycling. They go to the recycle center every other week. They were very unaware of this program, too, very shocked by it. Your other question was how I handled it before. I have very little trash. I do watch for what's recyclable, and I do keep my amounts down. So I have a 32-gallon that you saw in the picture. That was more than adequate. When it wasn't, I would have one of those garbage bags that I would throw out. We were allowed 4. It was never a problem.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming down.
And did we let the rest of the people in the
there are
audience?
Others here, I recognize there may be others here to essentially support the position, the view that if you could stand up, if you have, share her feelings about the recycling program. Please
Thank you.
stand. All right. Thank you all for coming down. The next appearance request is from the...
We have questions also, can we not ask?
No, you can't. Actually, sir, the procedure that we follow is she made the appearance request and she comes and appears and we ask her questions. We have 2 other appearance requests tonight, and the first one is from Fur Rendezvous, Greater Anchorage Incorporated. Sir, you're out of order, so you have to remain quiet. I think there are people here from Fur Rendezvous, if you could come down. And I know there's from the Iditarod Trail Committee that's next in line. If those from the Iditarod Trail Committee could come down and sit in the seats in front, then we don't have to wait for you to get down here. Go ahead, Mr. Hall.
Yes, Chairman Klayman, Assembly members, Mayor Begich. I'm delighted to be here this evening to thank you for
Just
your
remind us
support.
who you are. We may know, but it's always good.
My name is Ernie Hall. I am the board president, and this is Susan Duck, our executive director. And we're here to thank you on our behalf as the board, as well as the citizens of Anchorage, for being there to help and enable us to put on one fantastic winter carnival this last year. Not only did you help us by supporting us financially, as well as providing services, but you were there for striking of coins, you were there to participate in the events, you were there for poker tournaments. We were delighted with the participation on your part. But what we'd share with you is we really have a vision of what Fur Rendezvous can become in working with conjunction with the Iditarod, because what it gives us the ability is we're going to work to elevate the World Champion Sprint races, which occurred the first weekend of Ronde, to a world championship level so that we bring mushers in from Europe to participate in this contest. And by doing that, we hope to create 10 days in Anchorage that are going to be absolutely phenomenal, that we will pull people in from the world to come here to participate, to begin the first weekend by watching the World Championship Sprint races, and then by the second weekend, the start of the longest endurance race in the world. And by filling that time in between with world-class events, we're adding the Grand Prix this year. We will be doing some village basketball tournaments this year. And by popular request, we will be bringing back Running of the Reindeer. The turnout for that last year was absolutely phenomenal. We're going to add 2 more heats, which will give us a total of 4, which will give us 2,000 participants on the street just being a part of the race, let alone the 12 to 15,000 that were there last year, standing on buildings, on the parking garages, and as deep as they could possibly get on the sidewalks to be there to participate. We feel that Anchorage, thanks to you and the support of this community, we've got a world-class city that we can bring people in to stay in world-class hotels, enjoy meals in world-class restaurants, enjoy events in world-class venues. that they will leave here talking about that will do nothing but grow the economy for us in a time of the year that's very slow. So we're happy to report to you that we felt you got incredible return on investment last year, but we want to tell you that you haven't seen anything yet compared to what we're going to have happening this year. With that, I would like to give Susan a chance to make any additional comments that she would like to make, and then would certainly be more than happy to take any questions you might have for us.
Well, actually, under our procedural rules, you used the full 3 minutes, Mr. Hall.
Yes.
You may, Mr. Gutierrez, Mr. Flynn have questions, and we'll let her answer the questions, and then she'll get a chance to be heard. I would just ask, just for the public's information, if you could remind us of the dates we're talking about.
This year, it's February 27th through March the 8th.
Okay, and March 8th is the start of the Iditarod.
March 7th is the start of the Iditarod, and we have the World Championship sled dog races that start 27, 28, and 29th.
Okay. Mr. Gutierrez is first in the queue with questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Not so much a question, but a comment and a challenge to the rest of the body. I love these two events, and I think you did a tremendous job last year of really making Rondi relevant again, and it was a tremendous, tremendous event. I think you ought to add a special heat to the running of the reindeer for elected officials, and Mr. Chairman, if you do it, I'll do it. And I challenge every other member of the body to do it. We might even have a United States Senator who'd be willing to participate. I don't want to speak for anybody, but
I'll be
I
in
think that'd be a good idea.
Well, there's no doubt we should have a celebrity heat.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Mr. Flynn, questions?
Well, Mr. Gutierrez sort of stole my thunder. I was going to ask Mr. Hall or Ms. Duck to please confirm that the rumor that we will be required to participate is not true. Are you telling me otherwise?
Ms. Duck.
It's absolutely true. We do have a celebrity heat, and we need your support out there running. Either that, or we might let you handle a reindeer. Ernie did that last year and got a big thrill, so we'll line you up for that one if you're nice. I would just like to compliment everyone in the Assembly and the administration and the various agencies that we work with. Professional, cooperative, helpful. It's been absolutely an amazing experience working with all of these people, and I think that is what this festival is about the community and the people making it happen, and my appreciation and compliments to everybody here for doing that. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Buckrig. Questions?
I'm sure you're focused on youth, but I know when I was growing up, Fur Rendezvous was just a huge deal for high school people, and I'm hoping that you're exciting those young people and getting them downtown. And it was just a really nice thing. It was a way people saw each other. We met people from Kenai who were down for it, so I'm hoping that we've got some great stuff to unfold for those young people to get them into the tradition of Fur Rendezvous, because it's a great tradition.
Thank you.
We definitely do. There will be a family sledding hill downtown this year.
Great, thanks.
And Ms. Osiander, questions?
I just have to share with the Assembly that as a result of Fur Ronde, we now run with the bears for Bear Paw in Eagle River. And we are wild in Eagle River, and you are all invited to come. Thank you.
The Rondi Bear.
And we're excited to point out that we provided the Rondi Bear to run in your running of the bears last year. We actually stuffed Carrie Kerrigan inside that. That's a lot of stuff in a bear costume.
All right. Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much, and thanks to Fur Rondi team. You have done an incredible job. I will point out, I think I came in, 35, 36 out of that poker tournament, despite all those people you kept sending to our table to bump us out, me and Dan Fagan. I think Dan came in 5th or something. If I didn't have to go to the Greek dinner 5 hours late, I would have continued to play. They were wondering what happened to me, but I was on such a great winning streak, I was refusing to leave. But thank you for doing such a great event. And I know as you continue to grow the activities, it will become just a fabulous event, not only this last year, but this next year and so forth. So, again, thank you guys for doing what you're doing.
And, Mr. Mayor, thank you for the cameo appearance in the commercials that we did, and we'd love to give you an opportunity to do that again this year.
No one else is in the queue, but I think I speak on behalf of the entire Assembly in thanking you, and I can tell Mr. Gutierrez that he's laid down the challenge, and I will respond appropriately. Okay. I'm looking forward to chasing reindeer.
Thank you.
Next on the public appearance is the Iditarod Trail Committee. Is someone here from Iditarod Trail? And the Rondi has provided us with a thank you, Municipality of Anchorage, official sponsor, Rondi 2008, from Anchorage for Rendezvous. And I will deliver this to the administration at the dinner break. But thank you very much. Anyone here from the Iditarod Trail Committee that wanted to come down for that public appearance request? All right, hearing and seeing no one, that completes our public hearing requests tonight, and that will bring us back to consideration of item 11A, which is the budget. We have moved and approved the Budget and Finance Committee amendment to the S version of the budget brought in by Ms. Gray-Jackson. The next document that I have for an amendment, I believe, is from Ms. Osiander.
Thank you, sir.
And let me just ask, we've got Ms. Osiander's, and I know Mr. Coffey, you may have an amendment. Does anyone else on the body have any planned amendments they're planning to bring? All right. Mr. Coffey, can you hear us?
Yes.
You will be bringing an amendment?
Yes.
Okay, we'll take up Ms. Osiander's, and then we'll take up yours. Go ahead, Ms. Osiander.
You all got the sheet that I passed out. I'd like to move amendments 1, 2, 3.
Second.
And if I could speak to that, sir.
Go ahead and hit, something's...
I can't, sir.
We have Dr. Selcraig making some sort of a motion on the screen, which we probably want to clear. And, all right, go ahead, and Mr. Coffey is seconded. Okay. Go ahead, Ms. Osiander. 1, 2, and 3, and you'll be making 4, 5, and 6 later?
Just take this one at a time.
Okay, that's fine.
All right. This body has discussed now for a year and a half, or actually more than that, how we should look at bond O&M. So one of the things I did when I got my budget book was turn to the section that talks about items that are above the tax cap that are tied into bonds. And I tried to just scan those to see what made sense to me and what didn't make sense to me. And so if you turn to the back of that sheet I passed out, what I did is I asked Ms. Phillips to give me some breakdown on bond O&M. And I didn't ask it for every single O&M tax increase. The ones that jumped out at me. So this is what she sent back to me. And as you see, there's a breakdown on both parks and one on road bonds, and it shows what went into the budget above the tax cap for that bond. So I just looked through this and I thought, well, some of it makes sense, and some of it I don't really see the direct link. So what I did there, that hand scratch, is just my thinking, okay, I guess I see that, or I guess I don't see that. And if you note, I put question marks after 3 of them. Those particular positions, I didn't see a clear linkage with the bond. And then if you read further on down the page, you can actually read the bond itself to see what was covered and what was discussed in that bond. Some of these, for instance, the one on pools, the Assembly did absolutely discuss and approve, and I support wholly. I think that these were a little bit of a reach. So I asked for some better understanding, and at this point, I still haven't seen the direct linkage between the bond and these 3 positions. And I want to emphasize that I'm not necessarily averse to the 3 positions in themselves. In fact, this budget has grown, and I think with justification. They also have a fairly high vacancy factor, so they do have the ability, and they use some of that, to readjust positions. And we'd already talked about they're separating the park into districts, and I actually thought that they had a park division manager prior to this budget, because we've talked about that for 2 years now. So my rationale is that, strictly lack of linkage to the bond. And so at this point, I'll be happy to respond to questions.
Anybody have questions? Dr. Selcraig.
Ms. Osiander, I'm curious about the ones that you've got question marks, and I'm wondering that you've identified with question marks, and one of them is the Park Operation Division Manager. And I assume that you asked the administration what the responsibilities were of that position, and I guess I'm interested from the administration's viewpoint. Is this necessary because there's more parks to take care of and we have more people, or how is it directly related to maintenance? Mr. Abbott, maybe you could help me. Or who would be the right person to talk about this specifically?
Ms. Michael, if you want to respond.
Through the chair, I guess the big picture is that we have $100 million worth of road projects, which Parks and Recreation now is doing the landscaping for. If you're enjoying the landscaping along West Northern Lights, that is now being cared for with Parks and Recreation. We had $5 million in bond projects, and I worked very hard with Parks to title the positions correctly, to try and cover all the territories, and unfortunately, we just don't seem to be able to line up with the perception the Assembly has with how these funds should be administered. But what I can tell you in the big picture is that we have tons of parks to take care of. We need every position we can possibly have to do it. The bonds authorized us to spend money on positions for O&M, and that's what we're asking for you to approve. And, how many trees they're going to take care of, and, I just can't get down to in the weeds that far. But that's the vision for Parks and Recreation. We've come a tremendous way, and we've earned these positions, and we've worked hard to show you how that they're going to be implemented.
And Dr. Selkirk, if I can add, I want to emphasize that.
Go ahead, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. I want to emphasize that point about the road projects. One of the things we did, I think it was 3 years ago, through a work session with the Assembly, is detail out how those monies would be broken down and be very straightforward with the voters that we're no longer going to shortchange the maintenance and operations of our projects that we bond for. And Jim Lamson went through a very extensive process detailing out when you have $1 for road maintenance, O&M, how much will go to Parks and Rec for also the maintenance of that landscaping, because when you do like West Northern Lights and you spend $750,000 on landscaping, you want to maintain it. Otherwise, you pay for it later and it degrades the project in itself. So that money goes to Parks and Rec, which then again these positions are these and others are part of. So we want to emphasize that Parks and Rec has through the bond process, we had this exact debate a year ago. And, obviously if there's concerns, we would have loved to hear them at the bond time. We didn't hear them. We've done a lot of things to ensure that Parks and Rec is run very efficiently in the sense of the development. We now, for example, behind here have a beautiful new Midtown Park, an incredible facility that we hear comments on all the time. That takes additional resources to maintain it. But the other piece that I want to again emphasize is all the landscaping is a huge piece of the Parks and Rec element of what they have to maintain.
I wasn't looking for the weeds. Actually, I was just wanting a clarification, and actually I think the mayor addressed it, in that the road maintenance pieces have to do with new and existing, I assume, bond-developed facilities along the roads. In other words, as we've built roads, we've added landscaping, and that it comes with a cost. Is that correct?
That's correct. And many of our road projects in the past did not have that O&M.
Right.
And we're maintaining those greenways. But the new bonds are allowing us to add additional positions to help care for the new landscaping that we've installed.
And so my second question, and just for clarification, it wasn't, I didn't raise this issue. I think it becomes clearer for us to vote on it as we see the link to the bonds. And so my other question was in terms of the Park Division Manager, the operations manager, as you bring on new people to do this maintenance, and as the scope of work expands associated with the bond development that we've approved, you've just got more people, I assume, and so therefore you're needing that next tier of management. That's why I was interested in what the job description, that's all I was asking, is to clarify those things.
Yes.
So I'm wondering if those job descriptions in some way reflect that manage, I mean, are they going to be managing people who are actually doing the maintenance in the parks and those sorts of things?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Osiander.
Well, I guess I better repeat myself or say it differently, because I did not mean to have anyone believe that I think that there should not be O&M for bonds. I support O&M for bonds, and I actually support being more aggressive at O&M for bonds. But I absolutely need to find a nexus between what we're approving and the bond. And particularly this item for the division manager. We approved that restructuring of parks over a year ago, before the bonds were approved. And so I don't see anything about that that's specifically related to increased maintenance along roadways. I absolutely think that we should do increased maintenance along roadways, and everything here that talks about supplies and materials or, part-time folks to do the maintenance, I didn't touch. I looked for the things that seem to me like a recreational planner that aren't clearly joined at the hip. That was my rationale here. I do support this, and at the time, Mr. Mayor, I did ask for, give us some more information about how you're going to do it and what's in and what's out. I haven't gotten it yet, so this is how I have to proceed.
Ms. Johnston, next in the queue.
And I'm sorry I don't have this with me, but how many arborists do we have currently?
Microphone, a little closer to the microphone.
How many arborists do we currently have?
We currently have one certified arborist that supervises 2 crews during the summertime. So this is a second arborist that will supervise and actually do the physical pruning and care of the trees. So this will be our second certified arborist position.
And this one will also have supervise a crew?
They provide like lead foremen, so that they're the ones that are trained to climb the trees and do the major work, but they also provide guidance to seasonal employees who can do simpler pruning and do training like that.
And what exactly is the recreational planner? What is the job description for that? Sorry.
The recreation planner is our staff person who's responsible for responding to, I hope I pronounced this right, the GASB 34 requirements, which is as we bring on assets, park assets, we have requirements that we must maintain how those assets are cared for. So it's recording the day-to-day operations of the maintenance of those facilities. It's also working with the public to develop strategies on how to coordinate volunteers to do maintenance. They'd be in charge of the report cards and the community asset piece of it.
And I'm glad you brought up this report cards, because you have the report cards coming from each of your regions. And I guess I get confused because sometimes there seems to be a duplication of effort, but then I'm not sure who, in the end, I mean, you've got a position here to then coordinate all the regions, but then the regions are supposed to have some kind of autonomy and some kind of authority over their region. So I am confused.
All right, let me try to do some clarity. The regions, or our park districts, are really designed to provide staff direct contact with the community councils, the different user groups. And so they're staffed with, I would call them generalists, people who run recreation programs, who are good at working with the public. We have an administration division, the park planners, who are expert at maintaining records and doing community planning. They provide support for each district. So this one position would be providing support for all 5 park districts, similar to how we do the park maintenance. We don't have a maintenance staff assigned to each district because they may have different specialties. Did that further confuse you or help?
Well, kind of. I'm just starting now to sort of, I guess my question is, what percentage of this budget is administration? I mean, I see field work, and then it seems to me that we're we're getting larger into the administrative chunk?
Actually, we've been reducing our overall administrative budget.
By how much?
Well, we started at 10% administration 5 years ago, and we're now down to about 8.5%.
And with these positions added, you're still?
We would still be maintaining that because we've actually increased the overall physical workload of the workforce. So they're actually doing more direct services as opposed to administrative services.
Okay, thank you. One more question since we're on Parks and Rec. Did you see the list that we got last Tuesday from the Abbott Loop Community Council as far as they had a request for maintenance funding?
Could you pick up the page, about the 100-page document that's on the bottom there for me? Yes, in fact, I have a list from 53 different community councils who contributed in the report cards. The Abbott Loop was one of them. They actually gave their park a D. Overall, all the communities graded our parks at a below-average C-. So we have, and this is the request for fix-it items, and we have theirs, which is about 3 pages. But we have a long list of fix-it items. Many of their items on that part were the capital requests. They actually had never developed. So that's working with Mike Abbott's approach to develop a capital plan for them. And we do have some funding.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Gray-Jackson.
Thank you. I keep turning this off. To the administration, did I hear you say that part of this position is part of the responsibilities would be to maintain the new Midtown Park?
I was given an example of another park that's come online. I'm not sure the specific one, but the services that are now on that, for example, had an OMB or an O&M expense, and that is now part of Parks and Rec's responsibility.
Right. And also streetscapes. I'll give you an example, like the beautiful new Rogers Park. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Both of those are in my district, and I got to tell you, I've been in this town for, almost 27 years. And that Midtown Park is so beautiful. It's the first time in 27 years that I spent as much time in that park that I did this summer, in a park in the city, period. And so with that said, I'm really happy to see that the administration is bringing forward, a position to maintain the good looks of that park, the Rogers Park streetscape, and other areas throughout this municipality. So thank you very much. I will be not supporting this amendment. Thank you.
If I might add...
Actually, Mr. Dillon, I'm not sure there was a question, so you don't need to talk if there's no question. I don't think... Did you have a question for Mr. Dillon?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No, but I would like to know what he'd like to add. Thank you.
Well, I just want to remind the Assembly that not all our positions are hiring direct. We actually are funding $60,000 for private maintenance of the Cuddy Park, including the ice rinks that was approved last year. So we are mixing in staff. The arborist, by the way, will take care of the almost 150 trees in Cuddy Park as well as the streets. But we are also mixing that with funding for private contractors so that we can engage the community in a variety of ways. Thank you.
All right, I see no one else in the queue.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Coffey, go ahead and ask your question.
Thank you. I think what is troublesome to me about this is, and I hope people can hear me, is that the motto of the Parks Department is safe and green, and our parks are overrun by public inebriates and people who camp in them and so on. And I guess my question here is anything being done about that would help with this appropriation, or is this just to take care of these items without any regard for that concern of mine? Thank you.
Who's Mr. Dillon, or who's the best person to respond? Mr. Abbott, Mr. Dillon? Mr. Dillon, go ahead.
Yes, Chair to Assemblymember Coffey, we are having an active program with what we call Safe and Secure, where we're actually working with community groups, our urban foresters, and our arborists go out and help them correctly prune and limb up trees so we can create safe sight lines. We work with Community Work Service and our park maintenance staff to go in and clean up camps and repair those vegetations. So yes, we have an active program, and one of the major concerns of the citizens in the report card was to make sure we had clean and safe forested areas.
Yeah, and my question is that what these folks are going to be doing, or is it already being done?
Mr. Dillon, he's conferring.
Oh, he doesn't know. Okay.
But we also have a in-tax-funded public safety program for some rangers that will be directly working with that.
I hate to keep repeating myself, but my question was, are we doing it now, or are these people going to be doing some of it?
Let me, actually, if I could just, for a reminder, my memory of the budget, this is Mr. Coffey, it's Mr. Clemens, my memory of the budget is included in the parks are 2 park ranger positions that were not in last year's budget, and I know that on a state level, the state parks officers are actually licensed law enforcement officers, and my presumption is that our city park rangers will also have law enforcement capacities. I'm seeing heads shaking no, but anyway, I think the positions that Ms. Osiander is talking about in her request wouldn't be addressing some of the law enforcement issues that the park rangers would be, but I think Mr. Dillon may be able to clarify that.
Let me try.
I would like to hear from the administration, Mr. Chairman.
And Mr. Mayor, I see, is ready to respond. So I'll let the mayor respond.
And Jeff, correct me if I'm wrong, but again, just to echo what Mr. Clayman said, the idea of the park rangers to add additional eyes and ears within the Department of Parks, which will continue to work in the parks. They will not have the authority of a law enforcement officer. But second, I want to say that some of the work that now Parks has been able to do is managing some of the open space, which was the issue of the past. We never calculated that into park management. What people viewed as parks was, if you have playground equipment or a trail or a parking lot next door to it, that, you had picnic areas. But the reality is we have hundreds and hundreds of acres of open space or a forested area that needs to have maintenance, and that's what we have been embarking on. Are we at full capacity? No. The reality is, Mr. Coffey, your concern of inebriates and other folks within our parks, that will continue to grow because that is a statewide issue that we're feeling the impact to. And we have other areas, as you know, we are working on with the state, with Cook Inlet Tribal Council on long-term care and treatment for those individuals that are in our community that have substance abuse issues that are now camping in our parks. We have a larger percentage because of the economic conditions of rural Alaska. That's an area where just putting money in the parks is not going to solve. That will help us move people around and make constituents happy for the moment, and you can tell constituents that. But the reality is we have to have a long-term plan in this community, which is going to be expensive, and the state has to step up to the plate. So that's our long-term, which I know you've been very supportive of the last session in regards to the involuntary lockup and so forth. So that is a long-term plan. But Parks has a couple additional people this cycle, and now managing more open and forest space is going to make a big difference. But it's still, we're kind of swimming upstream in a pretty big current because of the economic impacts of rural Alaska are bringing a lot of folks to our community that are camping out in our parks. I mean, that's just a reality that we have to acknowledge, and I think we have to be honest with our citizens that just passing this budget does not solve that problem.
Does that answer your question, Mr. Coffey?
Well, I got an answer there at the end. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Osiander.
I'm a little bit confused why the discussion seems to be all on how important it is to maintain our parks when that wasn't the point of the amendment. I'm not arguing that it's not important to maintain our parks. And I'm not arguing that some increase in O&M isn't important. I'm asking for a linkage when we increase the tax cap that we can rationally defend. And I'm not hearing anybody express any concern about that but me, so I'm a little bit confounded. I do have to tell you that if that is not an issue for this body, then I'm not going to bother bringing forth the rest of my amendments.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Osiander. No one else is in the queue, and because Mr. Coffey is on the phone, I will ask the clerk to call the roll, and we'll vote on this. I would note a yes vote to this amendment would make the 3 cuts from Osiander Amendment 1, 2, and 3. It would make those 3 cuts from the tax cap increase. Go ahead, Madam Clerk.
Mr. Coffey.
Mr. Coffey?
Yes.
Yes.
We heard you.
Ms. Johnston? Yes. Mr. Flynn?
No.
Ms. Osiander?
Yes.
Ms. Drummond?
No.
Ms. Selkrig?
No.
Mr. Clayman?
No.
Mr. Birch?
Yes.
Ms. Gray Jackson?
No.
Mr. Gutierrez?
No.
Mr. Starr?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, that failed 5-6.
Fails by a vote of 5 to 6.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Gutierrez.
just a point of clarification. It's sometimes difficult when someone's on the phone. It's hard to tell if Mr. Coffey was voting yes or responding yes because he heard you ask his name.
Mr. Coffey,
Not that it's going to make a difference, I think, in this vote.
Mr.
but-
Coffey, were you voting yes as to the amendment?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I understood. Okay, what's that, Mr. Coffey?
You got it.
Okay. That fails by a vote of 5 to 6. Ms. Osiander, do you want to proceed with any of your other 3 amendments?
Apparently, there's no merit in pursuing that line of attack, so I won't, sir.
Okay. Thank you. The next, I think the only other person with a proposed amendment to the operating budget is Mr. Coffey. I didn't see anybody else indicate. Mr. Coffey, do you want to speak to your amendment, and had you distributed something in writing that we may have here?
Yeah, it was distributed last week. I don't know if everybody kept it.
It's probably somewhere, but go ahead and...
An amendment to the Anchorage Police Department budget. It was from Fund 151. It was in the amount of $129,000.
Fund 151 for $129,000. Is that correct? Okay. All right. We've got Mr. Coffey moved as the first. Moved and seconded. Go ahead and speak to your motion, Mr. Coffey. I think it was seconded by Ms. Johnston.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The purpose of this, and let me start with this. I recognize that we budget at the department level. This will not necessarily accomplish the goal. So in part, it is a statement of my objection to a policy that was changed back in 2005, and it's subject to the internal auditor's review right now relative to changes in the contracts between our unions and the city, and it relates to this. In the 2004 APDEA contract, 1/2 time of the union boss's job was to be paid by the city, and the other half by the union itself. That was changed in 2005, and now the taxpayers are paying 100% of the burden, the direct burden of having APDEA's president represent the union in matters relating to the city. I know that's also in the new APDEA contract, which is coming. I say I know it. I am informed of that. I don't know whether it's actually true. I haven't had a chance to get the contract yet. But I don't like the idea of the taxpayers paying to fund the cost of a union president when I believe that should be paid for by the union itself and not by the taxpayers. The union president is working for the union. He's not working for the city, and to make the taxpayers pay for it is objectionable to me. The reason that I then made this amendment is because it relates to the salary of the union president that the city would be paying. It's the same amount. And although I know that the administration is free to spend money inside its department, and I am not an advocate of eliminating that flexibility, nonetheless, I wanted to voice my objection to this type of practice, and this is my way of doing so, and I'm hoping that you will also find it not appropriate and support this amendment. That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Coffey, and I appreciate your getting all your comments in one fell swoop when you're on the phone. Mr. Flynn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure I disagree with Mr. Coffey's sentiment. I think he makes a reasonable point. Our other bargaining units, for the most part, pay for their union representation and leadership through their dues. And in terms of this practice within the pending contract, is an issue that raises some concern in my mind. That said, I don't think that this amendment is the appropriate method for dealing with that concern. I think we do so when we consider the APDA contract that is pending before us, I believe, at the December 16 meeting. And so for that reason, Mr. Chairman, I'm not going to vote for this amendment, but the concern is, I think, one that many of us share and that we're going to have to deal with before this contract is approved. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Dr. Selcraig.
I have a
question,
Mr. Coffey.
Yeah, hold on. Okay. I just would note we're at 6:56. My intent, we try to break at 7 for dinner. I'm going to suggest that we vote on this amendment after the discussion, and then we'll take our dinner break so we finish this amendment before we take dinner, if that's all right with the body. Go ahead, Dr. Selcraig.
I have a question for Mr. Coffey. Mr. Coffey, is the $129,000 the total cost of that position?
That's the total. That's what I am advised by Finance is what the city contributes to the salary. According to the information given to me by Finance, his total compensation, not forgetting benefits and so forth, is $159,000, of which $30,000 is, I am informed, $30,000 is paid for by the union. And that, my further understanding is that $30,000 is to make sure that he gets the benefit of overtime, which he would otherwise have were he a police officer on the street as a senior sergeant.
Well, my question, I guess, is that if we agreed to a contract which agreed for half of his pay, why are you seeking to remove all of it?
Well, I haven't agreed to a contract with half his pay. I believe,
isn't it already in the contract that we would pay half of this position? Isn't that the situation now under contract, Mr. Mayor?
Well, that's what's written in the contract. Right now, and since 2005, we've been paying 100%.
Okay, so actually,
You tell me what the contract says. I don't know.
It's my understanding that the contract in place that we already have has a 50% contribution from the municipality, and I guess according to you, the future one may as well. So I guess I would rather deal with this in the contract negotiations than in this way, and so I won't be supporting it. I do think that we need to be really clear about what we're doing, and we need to stick to the contract once we've negotiated it. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I could respond to that.
Mr. Coffey, I'll let you, but just let me
when my turn comes, I just don't have any way of pushing my button.
Yeah, I'll put you in the queue next. I would just note, and this may resolve answer some of the question. My understanding of the record is that the contract, the APDEA contract, had the city paying half of the president's salary, and then there was one of the side agreements or modifications to it that's been a subject of some question that occurred after the original contract was signed that changed it from half to paying full. And so the current scenario is that the city is paying the full salary with some contribution from the union. I'm not sure the percentage. And then my general understanding of the upcoming contract is that gets memorialized in the new contract. And if, Mr. Abbott, if I'm incorrect on that, you should tell me.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Starr, you're next.
And I appreciate that clarity. I think the emphasis is two clarifications, is that the contract in force, as Ms. Selcraig says, speaks to half pay. The side agreement, not ratified this body, speaks to full funding, which we have been doing since 2005. So, that said, we have that dilemma. I'm going to support the amendment to remove the full funding for several reasons. One of them is the classification, and we can talk about the side agreements till we all pass out, and I have. But my point on this one is that when we did the side agreement, we didn't also reclassify this employee. We've kept him as a senior patrol officer with some reference to either 100% duties or 90% duties to manage sort of the employee union members. And I think that if we're going to address that need internally, there would be first off justification to remove that and free up that senior patrol officer job. And this action, I believe, will fund that or force that issue through the elimination of the PCN number. The grievances procedure that this, again, when I researched out the requirement for this, the response was, well, it avoids a lot of controversy ahead of, say, a grievance filing or any sort of employee issue, and that may be the role that this individual plays. All that said, reviewing the contracts and the contract language and sort of the processes, the grievance process is clearly spelled out in contract. Contract language protects the employee and tells the procedure for negotiation. I don't think the role needs to be supplemented by, a $100,000 plus year employee to do that. We have employee relations folks. And the final catch for me is that we also have the employee relations board that ought to be interceding with this. So I can't justify the funding. For me, several things need to occur. Either free up this position for a senior patrol officer, and I would support the funding, or eliminate it in this suggestion. And I, again, would like to deal with it at the side agreements, but it's prudent to adjust the budget, make it representative of what the intent is, and that's to remove this position from the taxpayer's burden. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Johnston.
Yes, I have 3 questions. One is, what are the agreements we have with the other unions that we deal with?
In terms of what?
As far as their presidents who work for the, in fact, I was speaking to one of them, AMEA, and he said that he was allowed time to come and talk to me and be paid. What are the agreements, AMEA, what is it with the fired?
Sure. Each of the agreements allows for some use of work time compensated by the municipality for employees within those unions to do union business. Each agreement is somewhat different in the terms of that. Shop stewards, elected officers of the unions, etc., and each of the contracts speaks to the terms under which that's allowable. Some of them set dollar caps, some of them set hourly caps, some of them leave it to the language is less specific, less quantifiable. But each of the contracts has, as far as I know, they're all different, although there may be some similarity between some of them.
Are any of them as generous as this one?
In terms of dollars?
Yes.
I don't know that we've ever calculated the dollars associated with the, for instance, the shop steward time that might be involved. On a per employee basis or a per member basis, my sense, APDEA uses most of, I would suggest that most of the compensation associated with their union folks is associated with this president's position and less for shop steward time and other union time in their contract, although I have not quantified that. Other unions, AMEA, fire, etc., don't have a compensated president, but do use their executive board and shop stewards more extensively than APDEA does.
That might be an interesting.
Sure, and if we, and my sense is, if we broke it down to you by on a per union member basis, that might help equalize the difference between big unions and small unions.
Right. I've been kind of confused because the understanding was that it was 50% of the salary that we paid and 50%, and that would have meant that, as far as I can understand, it would have been a $60,000 salary because the union has been paying $30,000. But it looks like the president makes more than $60,000.
That's correct, and I'm not looking at any numbers right now, Ms. Johnston. So I'm not sure what numbers you're looking at. But yeah, the compensation for this individual, which includes more than just wages, it's also the benefit piece, is the number. I believe Mr. Coffey's calculation is correct. It's in the $130,000 range.
Right. So the issue as far as the 50%, we've yet to be receiving, as far as I can understand, the 50% from the union for this position, even though we've changed the agreement. It doesn't seem, well, Ms. Selcraig had brought up the fact that it was a 50% compensation, and it doesn't appear that we've been doing the 50% compensation as far as the share of the union paying for, that was just a comment. My last one is, I've understand from a number of our assembly members that they feel we should take this up when the labor contract comes up, not at this point, not in the budget. But is it my understanding that when the assemblies brought a labor agreement, we have two options. We either voted up or down. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
So then the only thing we can do is vote it up or down, and we can't negotiate. And I just wanted to remind the rest of our assembly that that is pretty limited. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Birch.
Yeah, just to clarify, this is, I do speak in support of the amendment and would note that this was one of the side agreements that was done outside of Assembly purview by the mayor, and on behalf of the APDA, Mr. Robbins, I believe, in 04. And this significant increase in cost and the burden to the taxpayers through this agreement is truly something that needs to be reviewed by the Assembly. And I support this amendment, and I am concerned that this provision is going to be incorporated in any follow-on agreements. Thank you.
Ms. Gray-Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank Mr. Coffey for bringing this amendment forward, because I can't speak for everybody here, but I'm going to, because we all want to save the taxpayers money. We simply want to do that. That's part of our role in this community. But I don't believe that this is the way to do it for a couple of reasons, because, quite frankly, I don't think this body has the power to eliminate specific positions. Not only was it mentioned the PCN number, but also the person who fills that PCN number name was mentioned. I don't think we have the power to do that. And I also think that because it is a contract that is legally binded, I think that that's another issue. And I'd like to ask legal's opinion, can we actually delete this position that is binded by a contract that's in place?
Ms. Westover or Ms. Tucker? Ms. Westover.
Through the chair, Ms. Gray-Jackson, without looking deeper into the contract itself, I probably can't give you a definitive answer, but my general answer to the question is no. We would not be able to change it by Assembly action.
Thank you for that. And with that said, I will definitely be voting no on this amendment.
Thank you, Ms. Gray-Jackson. Mr. Coffey, you're next in the queue, the last in the queue. Mr. Coffey, did you want to say anything more on this?
Takes me a second. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, this goes into effect in the new year, if it's done. That's because it's a budget item, number one. Number two, I agree with Mr. Starr. If we're going to pay for an officer to be on the street, then let's pay for an officer to be on the street. So we're not eliminating something that's subject to contract. And it seems it's sort of a funny argument to me. We just have gone through a situation where there was a unilateral change to the APDEA contract that resulted in this matter, the cost to the taxpayers being doubled, and everybody's saying, well, the mayor has the, or not everybody, but several of us are saying the mayor has the authority and the right to do that, and here we are trying to get it back to perhaps a more rational level, and very few of us seem to want to talk about that. And then finally, as Ms. Johnston is right, and the answer from the administration is right, if we don't address it now, we either vote no on the contract, or this practice is codified to put in a contract and becomes, we can't change it at that point in time. So I guess it comes down to this. If you believe that the taxpayer should pay for the boss of a union, then you should vote no. If you believe they should not, you should vote yes. That's it. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Starr.
Addressing the concern that we can't eliminate a position or we can't, and I believe that Ms. Gray-Jackson is correct in that. But that brings us back to the flummox that we had last year, which was our discussion on what are we actually doing. Tonight we're appropriating money. We're appropriating money by department. And the departments are free to do what they will with that money. That's what's sort of the misnomer here, is that, we feel like we're adding this and we're taking an arborist and removing this, or we're eliminating that. At the end of the day, we've tried both now. And I'm speaking perhaps a little more arrogantly than I should, but the intent and the spirit of this is to say that's not an effective use of taxpayer money. And we've tried to be as clear as we can. Earlier, we said, don't appropriate the money, you decide where to make those cuts. Now, when we say specifically that this pushes the policy of where we should be spending taxpayer dollars, then we're said, you can't do it. You know, this is what we're doing, is we're taking $129,000 off of the property tax burden for whatever reason. You fill it in. And that's where I get frustrated, is because we're saying we're appropriating less, we intend to remove the position, you figure it out. Contracts can override. We've got the contract decision. We can say yes or no. So the argument is, do we agree with the taxpayer burden to fund this position? Quite frankly, they may decide at the decision-making level of that, if we even do pass this $129,000, they may still continue to fund it. That's not our call. I do urge support, and I think it's an appropriate discussion to have. I'm glad we had it, and I think we should vote yes on it.
All right. Thank you. Ms. Gray-Jackson, I would note that we are, well, almost 7:15. I'm trying to move this along. Ms. Gray-Jackson, let's try to be no more than twice and quickly. Thank you, Ms. Gray-Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What I believe is that I don't want to see this municipality, also known as the taxpayers, faced with a potential lawsuit because, as Ms. Westover mentioned, she believes that we cannot legally do this. So, no, I don't want to see the taxpayers faced with a potential lawsuit and an effort to save right now $129,000. Can you imagine how much more we'd be paying and how much more the taxpayers would be paying if we went ahead with this? Thank you.
Mr. Flynn.
Real quickly, just want to clarify. This is a vote on a budget amendment. The vote on December 16 will be on whether we approve of this practice. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, and I will just use briefly my role as chair to speak last on this. As I understand union contracts, if we make this cut, that doesn't mean the administration doesn't have an obligation to comply with the contract. And so what it means is that this cut doesn't cut the union president's salary. All it does is cut the police department's budget. And my priority is trying to get more police officers on the street. I recognize the criticism. The criticism is well taken, but I'm going to just a minute, Mr. Birch. But I am going to support the budget as proposed. Mr. Birch, go ahead.
Under Robert's Rules of Order, I believe it's inappropriate for the chair to speak to the action on the floor of the assembly without relinquishing the gavel to the vice chair.
Well, Mr. Birch, that's an interesting point, and it has been my practice as chair, as requested by Ms. Osiander, that when I'm voting on something that I periodically explain the reason I'm voting, and that's exactly what I'm doing. This is more to explain to the public why I'm voting and not be silent. And so if we're going to keep these meetings moving along, I can't relinquish the chair every time I say something. But I appreciate your comments. No one else is in the queue, so at this point, roll call vote. A yes vote will support the amendment and cut $129,000 from the police budget. A no vote will leave the budget as set forth in the yes version. Madam Clerk, if you could call the roll.
Dr. Zulkrieg? No. Ms. Drummond?
No.
Ms. Osiander? Use your mic speaker. Mr. Flynn? No. Ms. Johnston?
Yes.
Mr. Coffey? Yes. So yes from Mr. Coffey. Mr. Starr?
Yes.
Mr. Gutierrez?
No.
Ms. Gray-Jackson?
No.
Mr. Birch?
Yes.
Mr. Klayman?
No.
Mr. Chairman, that failed.
All right. We have now, that's the last amendment from the budget, but consistent with my promise, we are taking dinner now. 15 minutes late. We'll be back in 30 minutes, and at that point, I don't think there's any more amendments, so I anticipate we will be voting on the entire. Yes, or either call back in, or was it easier if we called? Somewhere I have it. Well, Mr. Coffey doesn't seem to be answering. Okay. He may join us in a bit. We're back on record? Yes, okay. Are there any other amendments to the S version of the budget, item 11A? Hearing and seeing none, I believe it has now been moved previously and seconded for approval of the budget. And so as amended, anyone wishing, we are now, what is before us is approval of the S version of the budget as amended. And I right now see no one, Mr. Starr. You want to be heard on the budget, please put in the queue.
We're speaking to the main motion on the operating budget, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Operating the S version as amended.
Correct. It's been challenging for me to watch the evolution, and I will commend the staff in particular because it's been real fun actually. Because I'm a numbers guy and sort of think at all times of the day and night, and I'm sending emails sometimes at 1 in the morning and getting answers back at 1:30 in the morning. So kudos to your staff, in particular OMB, because this is really your bailiwick. But Sharon, you're right behind them there with all of that positive speak. That's sort of my disclaimer, because I'm not actually going to support this budget. I don't think this is a budget for our time. And I referenced the fact that the 2-year budget for this started probably 18 months ago or later. Again, it doesn't reflect our times. We're seeing a significant contraction in world economies, and yet we're moved to bring the budget to historic levels and burden our property taxpayers at an all-time high. I also believe that we're going to see the perfect storm build and continue to strengthen on the horizon. And what I mean by that is we're going to have increased spending pressures, and we're going to have reduced revenues. And we're going to combine that with what appears to be 4 of 5 major bargaining units bringing their requests for contract changes. Those will all hit us in the next 30 days. I find that a real challenge. I see that the perfect storm is going to hit us. What I predict is that the first quarter we're going to merge all of these increased costs, the cost of the increased budget tonight and the pressures of these labor agreements, and our taxpayer basis is going to reach a high level and an unwillingness to pay. I also believe that our state's going to be less friendly in supporting our requests for tax relief. Their resources are dropping with the price of oil almost every day. The ones I check in with and talk with, they also have the needs of rural Alaska on their mind. And I believe that rural Alaska needs are going to take precedence over this bloated spending. ASD will predictably tender an all-time equally record spending plan, and they'll also be looking at the state for their economic salvation. Last Friday night, I witnessed a meeting that I'd never been to before. I went to an organized group in my community. They asked me to speak. I came in there, and there was a group of 100 people truly asking for tax reform. I could see it in their eyes. There was 100 people at this community meeting in my area. I showed up in there, and they were all split divisions: seniors, pilots, professional folks, realtors, retired. They brought me the message that I needed to do something with property taxes. Their burden was too high and getting higher. They felt powerless. They came to me and asked me to help. I don't know if speaking to no is the budget. I'd like more time. You never have it in these situations. I don't know if saying no to this budget is the answer, but I can't consciously support it given what I just said. I think they're making us react and reach different solutions. This record budget, to me, is not the solution for our time. I'm going to vote no.
Thank you, Mr. Starr. I would remind the body we have a general agreement to try to keep our comments to 2 minutes. Go ahead, Ms. Osiander.
I want to start out to really say thank you and a job well done to the financial OMB. I'll tell you the work, how quick Wanda responded when she got a question and how willing she was to dig and work for the answer to a question was commendable. It was your first time through this gauntlet, and I think you did an exemplary job. I also thanks again to Sharon for the sound information and the analysis that she's given us. Both of you are and your whole department, though I don't see the rest of the department as frequently, did a job well done. I entered into this basically of the mindset that I would certainly accept it because we've already approved, as Ms. Gray Jackson has said, conceptually what's going forth, and we need to just finish up and then move towards a new administration in the future. So the next budget would be the one I'd really look at. There are parts of it that bothered me, though, even when I got it in the first place. I do not believe that the priority of this city is to delay bringing cops on the street. So I don't like that. I don't like the fact that we don't have any filtering mechanism when social programs come to us with identified needs. It's basically who's most articulate and who's here and who we personally feel some sympathy for gets the money. I talked about that DEEP program, but then I did a little digging after the committee meeting, and I discovered that they did go through an evaluation process, and they were ranked at the bottom. I didn't know that initially. I continue to be frustrated at the disparity of funding between our two senior centers. Chugiak's is getting $95,000 or $90,000 less, but I wasn't planning on pursuing that. The biggest objection I have right now to this budget is there's about $2.9 million that go above the tax cap, and I don't see the Assembly willing to even look at how that figure was arrived. I tried really hard to reach out and get answers for how that O&M was calculated, and basically I heard no discussion and nobody else seeming to have an interest in it, which leads me to believe that I don't understand the rationalization for it. So I'm going to do something I haven't done before, and I'm going to be a no vote on this budget.
Thank you, Ms. Osiander. Ms. Johnston.
Well, I too want to say a very big thanks to Wanda and to Sharon. We started this budget process out with a resolution that was passed last fall, and we did very little to change that resolution, and I found that both Wanda and Sharon followed that resolution to a T. And I know that, in fact, there were times that there was a slight excitement in their voice because they found money. And they found money that maybe didn't need to be there. And I know that they did a lot of scrubbing. And I've heard from members of different departments who felt scrubbed. So I have to say that it's been a pleasure. That being said, I too share some of. I've looked at. Debbie has been pounding my door as far as the O&M, and whenever she pounds it, I look through my notes, I look through the budget, and I've seen some of her points. And I do think we need. I don't see an overall policy as far as the O&M and how it's addressed by different departments. And I think if we're going to, especially as we go to our next biannual budget, that needs to be part of our resolution. I hate being a pessimist because it's not who I am by nature. But there's no question, and if those people who know me know that both my husband and I do quite a bit in financial services, and we're quite aware that this is a different world out there. And I again want to say thank you to Sharon and her staff as far as getting our general obligation bonds out, because that was an amazing feat in this world. We are in a recession. And we don't quite feel it here in Alaska yet, but we're going to. We have a state budget that was built on $83 a barrel, and now we're under $50. I was one of the folks that went down and lobbied the legislature to come up with a system for the revenue sharing, so we knew what to count on. I'm not sure if that system is going to hold up this year. I don't know if we're going to be able to get our revenue sharing. That's a large chunk of this budget. I'm a conservationist by birth almost, and I see conservation happening. And I feel that this conservation is going to affect maybe our muses. And this conservation isn't because people want to become green. This conservation is out of need. People are they're not being as flippant with their energy needs as they used to be. And I'm not sure what we're going to be getting from our utilities that we have gotten in the past. So I'm not really secure in this budget and its revenue sources. I know that probably this budget will pass, and maybe it should, but I'm afraid that maybe in the next 6 months we're going to have to make some choices we didn't want to make. So that being said, I think I'm just going to start making my choice now, and I'm voting no.
Thank you. Mr. Birch.
Just yesterday, we were provided assembly or evaluation of the AMA contract. This evaluation is dated November 24th, and it indicates a 5-year agreement with a potential cost to our taxpayers of somewhere between $20 and $30 million over a 5-year period. It's a significant increase. Last meeting, we looked at overtime costs in our Anchorage Police Department. I think we need to have the tools in place to enable contracting alternatives and efficiencies in our day-to-day operation of our business. A $435 million budget in these times of economic uncertainty are such that we really need to have the flexibility in a go-forward period here to where we can actually have introduce some changes. I think that what we've adopted here, the resistance to any even nominal reductions and revisions to the budget, I think have really indicate to me that we haven't yet come to grips with the impact that this budget is going to have on our individual property taxpayers in this community. As has been indicated by others, we're getting a lot of notes and comments of concern. I think as we look forward, we need to be attentive to the financial world around us, and I think we need a do-over on this, and I will be voting no. Thank you.
Thank you. For some reason, Dr. Selcraig doesn't appear in the queue, but she just told me that she did have a question. Dr. Selcraig, a comment or question if you wanted to be heard. Wait till you're at the microphone, please.
I'm appreciative of the concerns that Ms. Osiander and Ms. Johnson raised. I do think that we need clear criteria for O&M. I asked questions tonight about the O&M. I felt like there was a nexus, and I felt like I could vote for it. But it is hard to figure when you're sitting here what the rationale is, and there is this feeling of does this really connect, and how and why is it necessary? I also really think we have to revisit it with the voters at some level and make sure they're comfortable with this, the O&M idea, because the fact is that we all agree O&M is necessary, but as we add bonds, the O&M increases and increases and increases, and we do end up far above the tax cap, ultimately, if we continue this model. And I don't think it's the intent of the public to exceed that cap, really. I think that they like the idea of O&M, but would probably, in the long run, like to see us figure out how to pay for things without exceeding the cap. So I think the criteria is a really important idea. I don't think we should visit the next budget without spending at least 6 months before it talking about what that criteria is. I also think that we need a criteria for special needs. I mean, people come to us with real needs, and I mean special needs includes Anchorage Economic Development Corporation. We've got a whole bunch of fixed things in our budget that aren't directly related to the services that we provide, but actually linked to things that we value in the community that we think are important to fund. Tonight it was Project Access and the Boys and Girls Club, but it is always what comes to us and what we find to be compelling, but it would make a lot of sense to have some sort of focus as a body about those things and why we think they're important, and not just fold them into the budget regularly, but really look at those special needs that go beyond our services with a sense of what our priorities are. And last, the point that Ms. Osiander has spoken to twice, and I was listening carefully when she brought it up, I think 2 weeks ago, and we asked the chief about the issue of the police and if this was really going to slow down hiring the new positions or bringing those new positions on. And maybe I misunderstood, but Chief, I just need you to clarify this for me. It was my understanding when you answered us last time that the way that the system is working now, even you'll be able to move forward, this change isn't going to in fact mean that we're making the decision not to hire police on time based on the schedule. Could you explain that again?
Ms. Elcraig, yes. When I left the meeting, I was convinced that we were going to be able to hire our police officers on May 1st. And when Mr. Starr mentioned about the 3-month lag, we had a meeting regarding that. Right now we have an academy scheduled for May 18th tentatively, and we're planning on that, which overlaps with the academy that starts December 1st, so we don't have that lag time. We're not subjected to that lag time, basically to manage it to the point where we can, if we have to wait until May 1st to hire those officers, we're going to give them 2 weeks to let their employers know that they're going to be heading for an academy on May 18th. So originally, we were budgeted to hire them on April 1st. We will make it happen on May 1st.
Okay, does that slow down? Does that mean those police officers won't hit the road or hit the beat at the same point they would have originally? Are they going to be slowed down? You said something a little different last time. Did you just find out more information?
I went back and I reacted, and we started to plan based on what I took away from the meeting last week.
Okay, so what does it really mean then? Are we slowing down the process?
The process being pushed back 1 month, we can live with that. To push it back into July, that means we have to work harder to hold on to people longer. So we want to be able to
Oh, no, go ahead.
We want to be able to tell them specifically when we can hire them by, so that they can tell their employers.
Okay, so it will work.
It will work.
Okay, that's what I needed to know.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. So I am going to support this budget tonight, but I'm going to be actively involved and hope to be actively involved in these issues that we've laid out. I think we have real work to do to build the criteria. It's not going to be easy. Last but not least, the discussion that we had with our Budget Advisory Commission, I think, is an important one. I am in agreement that we don't know what the future looks like, but it's a very hard future to imagine, because last year we were looking at high gas costs, and this year we're looking at low gas costs. So I think that it's reasonable to have some strategies and some plans that Mr. Birch actually raised originally. What are we going to do in our first quarter budget revision if we've got less money? And I think that between now and that first quarter budget revision, we have to be prepared to talk about that and not be completely caught with our hands up in the air. We need to actually have some strategies if we need to reduce this budget, how we're going to go about doing it. But at this point, I believe that this budget is $7 million lower than what we approved last year, what we thought we were going to need in last fall. And with that, and actually I think kind of a hard scrubbing in terms of money that was on the table, I am going to support it. But I will be available first quarter budget review to come back and talk about things that need to be done in terms of the property tax issue and protecting people's interests in terms of property taxes. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, again, to echo the thank yous to my staff, Wanda, Sharon, and others, and Mike, and others who have worked very hard to get this budget to Elvie. Thank you for what you have done on the budget and the process you have laid out and went through to make sure that all the areas were addressed, but also your colleagues were listened to, and you listened to us when we thought we could make our point, and when you didn't agree, it was okay, but it was great and a great process, and I want to say thank you for that. But I guess I want to take a little exception to some of the comments that were said and only say this. because it was the last time I get to talk about my budgets. And I think this is a well-done budget for one reason that Ms. Selcraig just said, that, it was less than projected. Two, when you talk about stability of this budget, there's no question that was one of the first tasks we went on. That's why, Ms. Johnston, we don't depend on revenue sharing for operations of this city. That's money comes from the state. We give it to the taxpayers, but it's not to run the city as in the past, because we didn't know what the state would be like. We didn't want to depend on them. And so that's why it's not part of the budget. That's why when you look about 3 weeks ago, Business Week looked at this community and many other communities across this country and rated this community as one of the most sound communities and one that will weather this economic recession because of the work between the administration and the Assembly over the last 5.5 years to create a very sustainable budget process. And I recognize, Mr. Starr, the concerns people have on their property taxes. I'm grateful for living in this state. My family received almost $10,000 free from the state this year. I paid less than $5,000 in property taxes. I've been paid to live here. I think that's a great, unbelievable opportunity. When I look at cities all across this country and mayors that I talk to who are struggling because of their inability to plan for the future, and where we are today, we are a very fortunate city. As of last night, when we saw, I think, Chief, it was 36 new recruits going through the process, we will be at 88 new officers since 2003. Just a few shy of the 93 we had hoped for. When we look at the data points, statistics in our domestic violence and writs and some of the issues we've done there in a 50% reduction. Or this year alone, and we still have another month or so, but the homicide rate in half. When you look at a report that I just gave to Channel 11 that wanted an interview about gang activity in this community, it's because of strong actions we've taken with the prosecution office and the impact. That's because we made investments, property taxpayer money to invest in programs that work, that have impact. So as I look at the budget process, we've looked at it very carefully, and the requests we get are enormous. And the Chief has said, there was days when I first came into office, we weren't sure we were going to be able to do one academy. To be able to have a record number of people apply to our academy, I think it was 1,400 or 1,600 people applied, and out of that, the largest academy we've seen in decades, is a great sign for our city. The investment has been well done. And it's a combination between the administration and the Assembly and voter support. Many of the things that we have put into the budget, may they be capital or other investments, have come through voter approval. So I think, honestly, as you probably can guess, I'm biased. I look at this budget as a very sound budget, very strong budget. It's not dependent on many exterior resources. And we have a very diverse budget compared to when I first came into office. So I recognize some of the statements and some of the concerns, and it's how we've addressed it. For example, another one I'll just mention is the PERS issue. When I came into this office, PERS just kept going up and up and up and up. And because of the work between the Assembly, the League, the Municipal League, the Mayor's Conference, we were able to get a stabilization plan that now guarantees us a certain rate. Again, securing the future of this city for the long term. So, I think it's a very solid budget. I think the work the Assembly members who have engaged in this budget in the detail, I think, recognize it for what it is. And because we've been recognized by outside sources, the reason, Ms. Johnson, we could sell those bonds and why Sharon has been so successful is because of the success of the finances of the city. Because people outside don't really care the politics. What they care about is good investments. They invested in our city in rapid pace in a time when this country is going through economic crisis. So, again, I recognize people are making their votes. I would hope that you would support the budget because it delivers the services that the public is demanding and requiring that are basic core services that make a difference to the quality of life and why we have a strong economy here compared to most cities across this country and across this state. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Gray Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time. But anyway, one last time I want to thank my colleagues for working with me and following the process, and I think we've done a fine job together. And I want to thank the mayor for inviting me to participate in the budget process before it even came to us. Thank you very much, Mayor. It worked really, really well. And I want to thank Wanda Phillips and Sharon Weddleton and anybody else who worked with us, because I think this process, as far as I'm concerned, nothing to do with me, will go down in history because of how we started out. So thank you very much. I feel good about this budget and to look forward to working through any changes that we need to make up or down when first quarter arrives. Thank you.
Thank you. I see no one else in the queue, and I will just touch base briefly. I will be supporting the budget. I did want to speak directly to questions Ms. Osiander raised about O&M. I've had several conversations with both Wanda and Sharon in connection with the very concerns you raised, and I had the toughest with the recreation position. And I would say they barely got me there. As to the other two, the first couple of responses I wasn't satisfied, but they ultimately got me over the edge, but it was very close because I didn't think the first cases made were very compelling. And so, although I didn't discuss that with you, I thought your points were very well taken, and I looked at those with a lot of detail. And I think in general, as to O&M, we really have a kind of a missing process of making it clear to the public that when they approve bonds, and I think the public very much says if we're going to build it, we got to have the money to maintain it. And so I think there is general public support for O&M, but I think we need to make a better case to the public to understand how we're making those calculations and how those operations and maintenance costs are coming with the bonds. So those are difficult topics. I also think that there will be opportunities at first quarter to have a better look at things and possibly make changes in the budget. And the last is I agree with the comments of everyone that we potentially face very, very tough times ahead in this city, in this state, and in this country, and we need to be ready to address those. By the same token, we have to be prepared to take an approach that's moving forward, and I think this budget strikes that balance, and I am pleased to support it. And we will call for a roll call vote because Mr. Coffey's on the phone. A yes vote approves the S version of the budget as amended. A no vote does not. Madam Clerk, if you could call the roll.
Ms. Drummond?
Yes.
Ms. Osiander? Mr. Flynn?
Yes.
Ms. Johnston?
No.
Mr. Coffey? No. There was a no. Mr. Starr?
No.
Mr. Gutierrez?
Yes.
Ms. Gray Jackson?
Yes.
Mr. Birch?
No.
Mr. Klayman?
Yes.
Dr. Selcraig?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman?
Hold on just a moment. That passes by a vote of 6-5. Yes, Ms. Gray Jackson.
I'd like to move for immediate reconsideration and urge a no vote.
Moved and seconded. Moved for immediate reconsideration. I will ask first if anyone wishes to vote yes on that motion. Hearing and seeing no one, that motion for immediate reconsideration fails. That brings us next to item 11B, AR 2008-212, a resolution approving the 2009-2014 Municipal Utilities Enterprise Activities Capital Improvement Program. The public hearing on this has previously been closed. What is the wish of the body? Actually, I will defer. I apologize. Defer to the Budget and Finance Chair, Ms. Gray Jackson. Ms. Gray Jackson, as to this item. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move to approve AO 2008-112.
Second.
Moved and seconded by Mr. Gutierrez.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, go ahead, Ms.
I'm sorry, I made an error. It's 212.
Yes, item 11B. There's no S version on this one. Okay. Anyone wishing to be heard on this? I don't see anyone in. Mr. Flynn, go ahead. If you want to be heard on this, put yourself in the queue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Primo, are you in the audience still? I think many members just had a letter.
Microphone.
Thank you. I think many members just had a letter placed on their desk regarding a specific project within this budget. I noticed it came across my email during earlier deliberations and forwarded to Mr. Primo, and would appreciate, Mr. Primo, if you could just briefly address the comments in this note, specifically the aspect as to whether we can address these concerns later, even if we pass this budget as is tonight.
Through the chair, Mr. Flynn, we are always amenable to working with various groups during the design of the project. We have been working with all the community councils. We've also had an advisory group specific to this job that has been ongoing for over a year. I'm not sure if we can address their specific concerns. We can try, but we've been working with them over a year. It's in an area of town where a lot of people don't want our services, and it's not designed for those people. It is designed just for the area that does desire our services, that is a part of the Hillside District Plan that is suggesting we have those services.
Thank you, Mr. Primo. That's all, Mr. Chair.
I don't see anyone else in the queue. I'll go ahead, Mr. Birch. I'm not trying to cut anybody off, but no.
Yeah, thanks. Just to clarify, this is the same project that has been under consideration for some years. I think you're looking at a tank to increase the water pressure in South Anchorage.
That is correct, Mr. Birch. This project actually, because we were able to see the letter about 6 o'clock tonight, I was able to do some quick research, and this project was initially identified in 1994 through the Water Master Plan, reconfirmed again in 2005 in the Water Master Plan, and we've actually spent over $800,000 to date on the project, and it's been both approved by our board and this assembly in years past as part of the capital improvement plan, and now it's part of the capital improvement budget for 08 and 09.
And basically strengthens and provides a loop and additional pressure for existing service in the area?
That is correct. As late as 2005, we were down to the ability to only have 50 new homes in the Golden View area and deliver them pressure. Of course, the pressure on building homes has declined, but I think only about half of those have been built since then. But we're limited to about that level of expertise, of abilities to provide for houses in that area. Additionally, in 2001 and 3, when we had some very hot summers, we actually went negative pressure in that area of town on our fire hydrants. And without this, it's those 4 projects all involved in this South Anchorage Water Improvement Program. And without all 4 of those being in, we won't be able to meet those needs.
And I think one of the underlying concerns here is that it would expand or broaden the range of water and sewer service in the area, but that's already prescribed, is it not?
That is correct, Mr. Birch.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I see no one else in the queue, so I will ask if there is any opposition to approval of item 11B, the Municipal Utilities Enterprise Capital Improvement Program. Hearing and seeing no opposition, that budget is approved unanimously.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I'd like to move for immediate reconsideration and urge a no vote.
Moved and seconded for immediate reconsideration. I'll ask if there's anyone who would like to vote yes on reconsideration. Hearing and seeing no one, that motion for immediate reconsideration fails by a unanimous vote. That brings us next to item 11C, AO 2008-103, an ordinance adopting and appropriating funds for the Municipal Utilities Enterprise Activities Operating Budget, Fiscal Year 2009 update, and the 2009 Municipal Utilities Enterprise Activities Capital Budget. The public hearing on this matter is now closed. I would defer to Ms. Gray-Jackson as Chairman of the Budget Finance Committee. What is your wish?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move to approve AO 2008-103.
Moved and seconded by Mr. Gutierrez. Mr. Birch.
I had a question regarding municipal light and power, and we've had a number of discussions regarding a joint generation facility and where it was going to be located and so forth, but specifically regarding the capital liability that might be associated with that. And I guess I'm just trying to see if we have any, if there's been any changes here in the last few weeks. I know it's been kind of a dynamic process.
I'm not sure who is Mr. Abbott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Birch, when you say capital liability, you mean in terms of the project costs?
Correct.
I don't think that we've learned anything since the budget was submitted that would lead us to believe the capital costs can't be supported by the budget that you have in front of you.
Because there's some question about the project that was going to be jointly constructed with Chugach Electric as to whether or not the city would in fact be potentially financing that or not.
I think I get what you're saying. Thank you, Mr. Birch. At this point, the capital budget assumes that the ML&P will only be financing the portion of the plant, roughly 1/3, that we will own. If at some point there's a larger restructuring that might take place that might allow ML&P to own the entire facility and therefore finance the entire facility, that is not allowable under this budget and would require significant multiple assembly approvals prior to being able to do that. So that's not contemplated under the budget that you've got before you right now.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Osiander.
I think I've expressed a couple of times my continuing concern about solid waste. We have gotten some significant new financial information. I think we're on a good track of getting clearer and more accurate data as we move forward. So I basically started off thinking I was really going to look at this one section and then decided it was premature with all the changes that have occurred this year. So I'm going to be supporting it this time, but kind of announcing in advance that this one budget category is of high interest to me. Thank you.
Thank you. I see no one else in the queue. So I will ask if there is any opposition to approval of 11. Ms. Gray Jackson, did you want to speak, or were you getting ahead of me? Okay. Any opposition to approval of 11C, the operating budget for the municipal enterprises? Hearing and seeing no opposition, that is approved unanimously.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Ms. Gray.
I'd like to move for immediate reconsideration of AO 2008-103, and I urge a no vote.
Please click first motion for us to help our board. And Mr. Gutierrez, your second. On the board. All right. I will, as he's getting there, thank you, Mr. Gutierrez. I will ask if anyone wishes to vote yes on the motion to reconsideration. Hearing and seeing no one that wishes to vote yes, the motion for reconsideration fails unanimously. That brings us next to item 11D, AO 2008-104, an ordinance adopting and appropriating funds for the 2009 operating and capital budget of Anchorage Community Development Authority. The public hearing on this matter is now closed. I would defer to Ms. Gray Jackson, Chair of the Budget Finance Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to move AO 2008-104 for approval.
Please hit first motion and second. Those of you, thank you. Thank you both. Ms. Osiander.
I thought there had been some discussion about postponing this. Am I under a misapprehension?
I thought we were talking about the cooperative services, not community development.
I am in error. Thank you.
All right. Anyone else wishing to be heard as to 11D? Hearing and seeing no one, I'll ask if there is any opposition to approval of 11D, the Community Development Authority budget. Hearing and seeing no opposition, that is approved unanimously.
Mr. Chairman?
Thank you, Ms. Gray Jackson. Yes.
Move for immediate reconsideration of AO 2008-104. Urge a no vote.
Please push first motion. Thank you both. Anyone wanting to vote yes on the motion for reconsideration? Hearing and seeing no one, that motion for reconsideration fails. That brings us next to item 11E, AO 2008-105, an ordinance adopting the 2009 General Government Capital Improvement Budget. This item, the public hearing is closed, and I will defer to the Chair of the Budget Finance Committee, Ms. Gray Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to move to introduce and approve AO 2008-105S, and I'm about to pass them out because I didn't want anybody to not be able to find it.
And push first motion, and then if you could have a second from someone. Thank you, Mr. Gutierrez. Ms. Gray Jackson, if you could speak briefly to why we're getting this at this hour as opposed to earlier, and what is your understanding of what is in the S version?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Very briefly, the S version includes all of the Assembly's amendments, quite frankly, that were brought forward. At least that's my understanding. It certainly looks that way. If anybody sees anything differently, please bring it to the body's attention. But that is the purpose in the S version of the capital improvement budget. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Flynn, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick question. I only saw two amendments.
Microphone, for some reason, we're not quite speaking.
Sorry.
That's better.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Probably best pose this to Ms. Gray Jackson. I recall seeing two proposed amendments. One was yours with Mr. Coffey regarding Abbott Loop, and it was Mr. Starr's regarding several projects in the Chugach Eagle River area. Were there any other ones that I missed?
Through the chair, Mr. Flynn, Alexander Street is one of my amendments and Mr. Coffey's. That's included in this S version. And I don't think that I can address any of the other amendments, but based on what we have before us on spreadsheets at the last meeting, I believe they're all here, but you will have to individually look at them and decide if I'm right or wrong. Thank you.
Mr. Flynn, does that answer your question?
I'll do some quick reading, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Osiander.
I appreciate your concern about our confusion, but it would have been helpful to get this about an hour ago, so we would have had a chance to compare and see if the figures were the same as the amendment. I do have one additional amendment while we're doing that, however. I'd like to offer it this time, sir, if I could.
Yes, please, go ahead.
I move to amend by adding a project for $120,000 to address electrical wiring at the Chugiak Senior Citizen Center. If I could speak to that. I had an occasion...
Hold on, Ms. Osiander, push first motion.
Sorry?
That's okay. And Mr. Starr, thank you both.
All right. I had occasion today to be at a public event where I had a conversation with a member of the Finance Committee down in Juneau, and he shared with me his top local priority for funding, which matched the conversations and requests I'd heard from residents at the Chugiak Senior Citizen Center, and that's to install exterior electric plugs to the building. I asked him to email me with the cost figure to do that and how he'd gotten to it, and I now have that information. If anybody is interested in the specifics, I could share that. Basically, this would be a request for a direct state grant to do that wiring at the Senior Citizen Center.
So that goes just to, is it on the first?
In 09.
Right, but I'm just trying to figure out where you would put that on, or do you want the administration to figure out where to put it later?
Well, it would be under, you mean to which department?
No, I'm seeing Wanda Phillips is nodding her head that she understands generally what you're asking, and we don't need more clarification for her to be able to incorporate it into the budget. Right, it would
be, I am assuming, to operations and maintenance.
And it's a state grant.
And it would be totally a state grant, and I have here actually the email from the legislator with the specifics on what he has in mind.
All right, I think that's enough clarity to be able to move forward. I see Ms. Phillips is nodding her.
And I understand Mr. Lamson is quoted in this email, so I understand he's aware of the project.
All right, I will ask if there is, Ms. Gray-Jackson or Dr. are you speaking to this amendment?
I was just going to clarify where it needed to be, but I think that's been taken care of. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
I'm speaking to the S version, so...
Okay, so you can hold off, because we're right up now on the amendment. Ms. Gray-Jackson, I'll take you out of the queue. I will ask,
you want to see it?
No one else is in the queue as to the amendment. I will ask if there's any opposition to adding this $120,000 for Chugiak Senior Center to this capital budget. Hearing and seeing no opposition, that amendment is approved. Ms. Osiander, did you have anything else?
No, sir.
And now what is before us is the capital improvement budget. Dr. Selkirk.
I had raised the issue of Campbell Airstrip Road and wanting to include that in our legislative agenda. Is it required to be on this list in order to be part of that process? In other words, when we get to the point, pardon?
Ms. Gray-Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Selkirk, we can add it to the legislative program if it's not part of this project.
Okay, and it doesn't reduce its attention in terms of when we get to the legislature, it won't be any less.
It'll be included in the legislative package.
Good. Okay, thanks. That's what I wanted to make sure.
Right. Mr. Starr.
Yeah, I have a correction on an item that was omitted from the list previously submitted the last meeting. The request to include $250,000 or $25,000, excuse me, for Emergency Operations Center at the new Eagle River Valley Center is not on this new project listing as submitted by Ms. Gray-Jackson. So if I could get that.
Second.
So that's a motion to amend to add $25,000.
Yeah, that's right. And again, it's just a carry forward from a project that's ranked. We have funding in the bank now, and I think it's just a worthy cause to keep that additional emergency ops center on track.
Mr. Stucco, if you could push first motion, please, and I think Ms. Osiander was the second. So it's $25,000 for Chugiak Emergency Ops Center.
Is it 250, Debbie, or
Could
25?
I clarify?
I'm sorry. Yes.
We talked about this, Ms. Michaels?
Yes.
Remember we talked about this at the last meeting? And my memory, John, wasn't it 250,000?
Yeah, it is 250, I'm sorry.
And you were going to match, you were going to put in that request for the library with this, and so the total request for Valley River, I thought, was 500. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So, John, Bill, are you correct? Are you okay with going with those figures, or?
Well, if the board has approved that, John, I guess I am. I don't mind, using that. But your local match contributions, is it a board approved item?
Who's the right person to answer? Come on. Oh, here we go.
And I guess if I could make it a floor amendment so we can speak to it clearly, it is right. Debbie's correct on the 250,000. But your amendment now, as Debbie has been corrected to include the additional contribution from our local.
Mr. Chairman, can I respond?
Yes, please, Ms. Osiander.
We had a conversation about this last week, and I conferred with Ms. Michaels and her department, and Mary Jane, maybe you want to chime in here. My understanding is you were very supportive of the funding for the EOC, and you talked about doing a joint request. Could you clarify what you had in mind on that?
That is correct. This would be for the actual, the outfitting of the EOC, the computers, the necessary equipment for an actual emergency. The additional funds we're requesting are for some additional items we'd like, our telephone system, some of the things that we hadn't identified in our capital project. We wanted to ask for an additional $250,000. So it'd be a total of $500,000.
Okay. But what would be, there's already a request in here for Valley River. So what, would it have to be amended? Could you clarify for me what amendment would be needed to bring it up to what you suggest, Ms.
I'm sorry, I don't have a copy of the amendment. What's the amount in there now?
Well, that's what I was asking you.
I'm sorry. I don't have a
250 for the emergency ops center was what was specified.
Like, to modify that to include
Actually, what I would actually like us to do is let's stand down for 5 minutes, and we're going to take a 5-minute stand down so that we can clarify exactly what's going on about this proposed amendment. And Ms. Phillips, if you could coordinate to make sure that we're all looking at the same budget line, because my sense is there's a budget line about the the Valley River Center,
EOC.
and we need to make sure we're getting the right amount and the right amendment. We'll take a 5-minute stand down. Everyone stand up, stretch.
Yeah, it is there.
Go to the bathroom. Ms. Osiander, hit first motion, please, and Mr. Starr.
I can. Okay.
It just fixed itself. All right. Go ahead, Ms. Osiander. We're on page 9-2, and administration, I assume we're tracking?
Yes, I conferred with the administration on that.
Okay. And reduce that?
Reduce the request to $250,000.
From 750?
No, it's 500, sir.
Okay, I see. Which would make the total at the end of that line 500.
Correct.
Okay. 9-2. All right. Any problem from the administration with this change? No problem. Okay. Yes. And Ms. Phillips is tracking if you need more detail. Any opposition to the amendment proposed by Ms. Osiander on page 9-2 relating Eagle River Town Center EOC facility? Hearing and seeing no opposition, that amendment is approved. Any other proposed amendments to the capital improvement budget? Hearing and seeing none, I will ask if there is any opposition to approval of the capital improvement budget, item 11E. Hearing and seeing none, that is approved unanimously with Mr. Coffey abstaining.
Mr. Chairman?
Thank you, Ms. Gray-Jackson.
Move to immediate Move for immediate reconsideration. Urge a no vote.
And please hit first motion. Anyone wishing to vote yes on the motion for reconsideration? Hearing and seeing no one, that motion for reconsideration fails. That brings us next to 9F, item 2008-211. A resolution of the Municipality of Anchorage approving the 2009 through 2014 General Government Capital Improvement Program. As Chairman of the Budget and Finance Committee, Ms. Gray Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to move to introduce and approve AR 2008-211S, and it was passed out about 15 minutes ago. I'm sure still not enough time, but I'm sure everybody will be able to locate it. And this, did everybody find it? 15 minutes.
It got passed out while we were discussing the last.
I should have waited.
It's 211. The new 11. Has everybody got it? Okay, everybody's got one in front. Go ahead, Ms. Gray Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And this is the Capital Improvement Program, which includes the year two. Now, Debbie.
Ms. Osiander.
My humble and abject apologies.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This resolution is approving the Capital Improvement Program, which includes the year 2009, and it incorporates the some amendments that were brought forward at the last meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone in the queue to speak to 11F? Hearing and seeing no one, I'll ask if there. Dr. Selcraig.
I'm going to support this evening, but I do want to point out that information technologies is always kind of a mystery to me in terms of what's clumped in. And so I look forward to this year where we can kind of break those large numbers down into smaller numbers so we can understand what we're actually buying. It's always presented as a whole system, and we needed the whole system, and the whole system cost this much, where other things come to us and we actually understand where there's opportunities possibly to make some decisions. And so I would be interested in looking at this budget in a new way rather than how it's been presented to us in the past. Thanks.
Ms. Gray Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe that we need to incorporate the last two amendments that were made for the budget into this document also. So with that said,
could
Ms. Osiander, I'm sorry. Mr. Starr's next in the queue, but I'm a little bit confused about what the motion is.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, go ahead.
There was no motion from me. I just wanted to advise my colleagues that we need to incorporate the amendments that were made in the budget into the program, because the budget is part of the program. 2009 is part of this, so thank you.
Ms. Phillips, I see you with a thumbs up. Can you give us a quick explanation? And I have two in the queue, but if you could give us a quick explanation of how this would happen without us having to go line item.
If you could incorporate the two amendments on the Eagle River Emergency Operations Center and the Chugiak, this represents 2009. This will reflect the changes that you just previously made.
That's about
Thank
what
you.
I was about to do that, sir.
Okay, you were about to make that. Okay. Go ahead, Ms. Osiander.
And I'm going to ask again, Ms. Phillips, for help once more. And that is, I'd like to move to include the line item budgets that were just made relative to the Chugiak Senior Center and the Eagle River EOC.
And is that, from the administration's perspective, is that enough clarity for purposes of action?
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Okay. It's been moved by Ms. Osiander. Click first motion, please, and Mr. Starr is seconded. I will ask if there's any opposition to approval of those two amendments. Hearing and seeing none, that is approved unanimously, and so now we have 211S as amended. Did that answer what you were asked to be heard on, Ms. Osiander?
That's what I wanted to speak to.
Mr. Starr.
Might be a little late now that we've already funded it. I have a question for the administration. Do we have police cars in this budget? Is this where those show up, Mr. Abbott? Where do we fund the new police cars?
Police cars for new officers, in other words, for the enlargement of the fleet, would be funded separately, probably from either a capital grant not currently budgeted here. In the past, we've sought state funds for that. In other years, we've used forfeiture and seizure funds that APD recovers through the course of criminal investigations. The replacement for existing vehicles is paid for the depreciation, which is constantly being recharged and repaid into the fleet account, the 603 fund, I believe.
So I guess the question is, I haven't looked in here. Are we going to go to the state again and ask for some help on new purchases of police cars, or
we'll either go to the state, or we'll plan to use forfeiture and seizure money, or both. And I think that the likely increase in fleet vehicles for APD in 2009 is in the range of 10.
Does it need to be in this document that we're doing tonight?
No, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
I see no one else in the queue. I'll ask if there's any opposition to approval of 11F, the S version as amended. Hearing and seeing no opposition, that is approved unanimously.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Ms. Gray-Jackson.
Move for immediate reconsideration. I urge a no vote.
And please push first motion. And a second. Thank you, Ms. Osiander. I will ask if there's anyone that wishes to vote yes on the motion for reconsideration. Hearing and seeing no one, that motion for reconsideration fails. So that means we have now approved all the items on for the budget tonight. Congratulations.
Congratulations, Mr. Chairman.
That next brings us to item 2008-107, item 13A, an ordinance of the Anchorage Assembly amending the zoning map. Thank you very much. This is relating to Doubletree Center subdivision. I would note, prior to opening the public hearing, it has been discussed that we will be continuing this public hearing until at least December 2nd. And I'm wondering, is there anyone here connected to this development that's here tonight that can respond to one question on a motion to postpone? Hearing and seeing no one.
Again, is that lady here for Doubletree?
No. It's a... No. Is Mr. Nelson here? No, he's gone too. All right. I would entertain a motion at this point to postpone the public hearing on this until December 2nd. This is what we agreed last week.
So moved.
Second.
All right. Oh. This is Doubletree. Okay. I will ask if there's any opposition to postponing 13A until December 2nd. Hearing and seeing no opposition, that is approved unanimously. That will be taken up on December 2nd. I would also note with regard to this, I raised a question by email to one of the people involved in this project asking, because we received communication from the Spenard Community Council wanting us to let them have one more look at it before we approved. And so the question I asked, which I hope to get an answer tonight, but I don't get the answer, is can they wait till the 16th? And if they could have waited till the 16th, I would have suggested the 16th for us to take this up. But it's on for the 2nd. But if they can wait till the 16th, be prepared on the 2nd, we may move it one more time. Ms. Gray-Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Midtown Community Council is also involved, and I found out today that they were approached in the summer when there's no meeting. So I asked that they contact the Midtown Community Council also prior to our next meeting.
Okay.
Thank you.
We'll make that effort. Ms. Handyside, can you see that they get notified? Thank you very much. That brings us next to item 13B, 2008-114, ordinance of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly repealing. Thank you. This regards to the Cooperative Services Authority. Again, is my anticipation, I think this is going to be moved to postpone for at least one, if not 3 weeks. Mr. Starr, this was your ordinance. Do you want to speak to that?
Well, I'd like to see if there's anybody here to open the public hearing, if there's anybody showed up to speak to it. I think either continue the public hearing or close it and then postpone it would be my interest.
Given the general plan to push it forward, I'm inclined to not open the public hearing if no one's here to see it. Is there anyone here that wants to be heard on Cooperative Services Authority? All right, hearing and seeing no one, I think we can leave the public hearing as something we can open up. What is the preference, to put this on for the 2nd or the 16th?
16th.
16th. Okay, is there, Mr. Starr, you want to make that motion?
Can't push my button.
Oh, Mr. Flynn, were you making the motion for this?
I'll make the motion. What do you want?
Well, the machine isn't cooperating. Mr. Starr is the first, and
That's good. You got it.
and who was the second?
L.B. Gray.
Ms. Gray Jackson. All right. Go ahead and make your motion, Mr. Starr. Postpone to the 16th?
Correct.
Any opposition to postponing 13B until December 16?
Can I speak to it just to educate the body a little
Yes,
bit?
absolutely. Please do.
So, again, I brought it forward with the intention to sort of look at business a different way. The whole agency grouping with CSA has to be revisited. I spoke with the administration, specifically Mr. Abbott, before I moved it. The board, there's a formal board that operates this, and I guess the administration, do we call this an enterprise activity, Mike, or what's the technical for this?
This would be a municipal authority.
Okay. All right. Well, in that case, there's a board that oversees this. They've met. At this juncture, they concur in spirit. I think what I did earlier tonight was delay the amendment to sort of move funding as well, with the anticipation that restructuring and therefore will be done. And do you want to speak to it, Mr. Abbott, too, just for a minute so we're clear? I guess my concern earlier this afternoon as I spoke to you was sort of the employees and that also, if you could make mention to that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Starr, the Board of the Cooperative Services Authority unanimously voted a couple of weeks ago to essentially endorse the approach that Mr. Starr's ordinance embraces. We plan to work with internally ourselves as well as with the board, or with, the employees of CSA to ensure a smooth transition away from an authority structure to a general government structure for the operation of the MuniMart program. That will be brought into a combination of the IT and purchasing departments. We expect to achieve some cost savings immediately and significant cost savings over time by doing that. We do have a plan in place to take care of the employees, and there's currently 4 CSA employees. They'll either have a chance to take positions here within the municipality, accept a small severance package and move on, or potentially contract with the municipality to help us out during the transition. The reason we're not prepared to recommend this ordinance pass tonight, we haven't worked out all the details on the implementation of the transition. It may be necessary for the CSA to function for a few weeks in 2009, simply so that we can sort of close out their books in a timely manner. So the effective date of the ordinance that Mr. Starr has recommended may not be the appropriate one, but we're definitely in sync with what he's trying to accomplish, and we're going to be supportive of it in the end. And I think by the 16th you'll have a package in front of you that both Mr. Starr and the administration can support.
Thank you. And just thank you for that, Mr. Abbott, and your cooperation here to get to the bottom of it. I have also just a point of clarity. Ms. Weddleton, if they don't submit a budget by a fixed period of time, our actions have to approve a certain budget by, what's the date in December that we have a?
Mike, do you know the date?
The CSA, if we do need to keep the CSA alive, for want of a better term, for a brief period of time in 2009, we'll be able to introduce that item on December 2nd for action on December 16th. And we'll be prepared to do that if that's in fact necessary. But our hope is to in fact not require any appropriations at all to CSA for 2009. But there will be time to act on it in time for it to take effect on January 1.
Okay, thank you. That's also just an urge to postpone till the 16th then. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll ask if there's any opposition to postpone until the 16th. Hearing and seeing none, that is postponed until the 16th. That brings us to next item 13CA, our 2008-254, a resolution of the Municipality of Anchorage appropriating $143,636 for the State of Alaska Department of Transportation and Public Facilities. Thank you very much. The public hearing on this matter is now open. Anyone wishing to be heard as to item 13C, please come forward. Hearing and seeing no one, the public hearing is closed. What's the wish of the body?
Move to approve.
Moved by Mr. Flynn, seconded by Ms. Osiander. Thank you. I see no one in the queue. Is there any opposition to approval of item 13C?
Just a little bit late, that's all.
Oh, sorry, Mr. Starr. I'm on a roll now. Go ahead, Mr. Starr. I apologize.
Through the chair, Mr. Abbott, the allocation again is directly to overtime on the police budget, which we'll now grow the budget again this year for their allocation. Why don't they put that into straight time budget? Is there a practice or a policy or a statement that says that it's going to be overtime funding?
No. Functionally, in terms of legal authority, it doesn't matter where it goes in terms of the appropriation authority. The distinction between straight time and overtime is an administrative tool that is used primarily by OMB and the department leadership to manage their, the internal portions of, in this case, a $100 million budget. But there's no functional difference between appropriating it to straight time or to overtime.
Other than it goes directly into the account number as it's written tonight then, or does it go into a general fund and get another general ledger entry later? Technically, I get concerned every time we see this. This one is pretty close to applying for impaired drivers sort of maintenance, and you can see officers doing that, but oftentimes we see other appropriations go directly to the line item, and ultimately it grows their budget inadvertently, I guess, is what I'm getting at. I don't mind giving them the money, especially on the grant programs, but it would seem to make more sense to go into a direct line allocation for straight time as opposed to the overtime. So if there's no difference, as you said, it's an appropriation, it goes in the department, they spend it as they will. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Starr.
Thank you. Seeing no one else in the queue, is there any opposition to approval of 13C? Hearing and seeing none, that is approved unanimously. That brings us next to item 13D, AR 2008-258, a resolution of the Municipality of Anchorage appropriating $165,500 as a contribution to Heritage Land Bank. Thank you. The public hearing in this matter is now open. Anyone wishing to be heard, please come forward. Hearing and seeing no one, the public hearing is closed. What is the wish of the body?
I had it.
Move to approve.
And a second, please. Mr. Starr, thank you. Dr. Selcraig, a question or a comment?
I have a question for the administration. When I looked at this, it didn't really make a lot of sense to me. It was unclear what we have agreed to do and why we've agreed to do it. Can you just give me a little background on this? I just need some background to understand, what's the long-term commitment here and, what was the benefit to us and how did we get here? I don't get it.
Through the chair, Assemblyman Selcraig, this is part of the City Hall lease, and it's a requirement of the City Hall lease that we put funds into reserves annually. And it's a triple net lease, so we not only pay the lease rate, but we're also responsible for the improvements to the facility as they occur.
One of the things, every time we kind of come up to one of these leases, I always have this kind of nervous feeling that I'm committing to something that I don't quite get. Would it be possible for us to have a work session, and this doesn't have to be right away, but I'd like to look at all of our leases. I know that's a big work session, but a look at all of our leases, a look at what our terms are, to get a sense of how these leases are working for us and, what the cost is. And I know this administration didn't negotiate them all.
That's correct.
I am interested because I think when you add them all up, it's a lot of money, and I'm just wondering I just would like to feel secure that we're engaged in the best structure.
I'd be glad to schedule that for you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, and I also know that may be a topic that might be appropriate for the Budget and Finance Committee to take up before it becomes a full Assembly work session, and of course anybody's welcome at Budget and Finance Committee meetings.
Any setting would be okay with me.
All right. Mr. Birch.
Just could you clarify it says the source of the funding is the area-wide general fund Heritage Land Bank Real Estate Service Department. Could you clarify the source through the chair of the contributions from other funds, the $165,000?
Ms. Weddleton.
Is that coming from the sale
Michael,
of municipal lands, or is the Heritage Land Bank? I just would like a clarification on the Heritage Land Bank Department.
Through the chair, The source of the funding in the short run is Heritage Land Bank cash on hand. In the long run, Heritage Land Bank would be reimbursed as it sells properties that it currently owns, and it has some receivables for sales of properties and anticipates that in 2009 it should receive quite a bit of cash from sales of real estate lots.
So we're basically utilizing fund reserves that were gained by the sale of municipal assets for an operating cost vis-a-vis our building improvement fund.
Through the profits gained. So, for instance, if Heritage Land Bank operates well, it should be a profit-making entity in that it has access to lots, some of which are really quite valuable. And as these lots are sold, Heritage Land Bank, I believe in 2009, will be an entity that actually generates some profits that it can use for purposes such as this.
Thank you.
Mr. Starr.
Yeah, just looking at it, we pay a monthly deposit into the reserve fund, and I see looking at the lease on the second page, and this says we can voluntarily increase our deposit, and also a requirement then to adjust the amount in that fund, it appears to me, from a CPI perspective. What action are we doing with this one? Are we just voluntarily putting more money in the bank, or do we have to catch up on a reserve deposit requirement, or are we adjusting for CPI or something else?
Through the chair, these funds will be used for improvements to the building as required on an annual basis. I don't have the list in front of me, but I could provide that for you. But there are certain requirements that must be done on the building within a timely manner. For example, we just recently received from the owner a update on the building and what they believe are the things that need to be done to keep the building in good shape. And so we have to go through that with them. Some things we agree, some things we don't. But we have to keep adequate funds to address improvements as they come up. We just had a problem with the boiler. We have to do improvements to that. So.
Yeah, and this, again, without going too far, this is, going back to the purchase of the building versus the continued upgrade to Class A space that we have to keep doing, and this is part of that pain of doing that. Is that kind of also what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Selcraig.
It just sounds like this is a reversal of a relationship with a landlord. Usually you get to call the landlord when the boiler doesn't work. It's not, I've never heard of a situation where the landlord calls you and tells you to replace his boiler. So, it's just, I wonder how expensive this is, and I'd really like to look at the numbers. And I know we're paying a lot and we're locked in, but my question is it still, is there a way to get out of this if there's a better option out there that we'd want to take and maybe even take some costs right now, but get out from under something that isn't working really?
We have 19 years remaining on the lease, and we do have an option to purchase, and we recently looked at that option and found that it was not cost effective for us to purchase the building at this time. But that's not to say that we may revisit it again. We have that, the option remains open, and so we have that opportunity to look at that. Right now, our lease rate is actually very good, given the market, although it's a triple net lease. So we're paying about the same for improvements to the building as we are in a lease rate annually. So it's pretty substantial, because it's an older building and it requires a lot of maintenance.
All right. Does that answer all your questions, Dr. Selcraig?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. I see no one else in the queue. I will ask if there's any opposition to approval of item 13D. Hearing and seeing no opposition, that item is approved unanimously. That brings us next to item 14A, AO 2008-115, an ordinance of the Municipality of Anchorage, Alaska, authorizing and providing for the borrowing from the State of Alaska Drinking Water Fund an aggregate amount not to exceed $6,600,000.
Waive reading.
Thank you very much. Public hearing in this matter is now open. Anyone wishing to be heard, please come forward. Hearing and seeing no one, the public hearing is closed. What is the wish of the body?
Move to approve.
Moved and seconded. I see no one in the queue. Is there any opposition to approval of item 14A? Hearing and seeing no opposition, that is approved unanimously. That brings us now to item 14B, AO 2008-117, an ordinance amending Anchorage Municipal Code, Section 26.30.040 to revise standards for interconnection. Thank you. The public hearing on this matter is now open. Anyone wishing to be heard, please come forward. Hearing and seeing no one, the public hearing is now closed. What is the wish of the body?
Move to approve.
Moved and seconded. Mr. Flynn is in the queue. Go ahead, Mr. Flynn.
2 words, net metering. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I'm sorry. 2 words, but for those of us who have slow minds, we need a little more.
Net metering.
Net metering. Okay.
That's all I have to say. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Seeing no one else in the queue, any opposition to approval, item 14B. Hearing and seeing none, that item is approved unanimously. That brings us next to item 14C. AO 2008-116, ordinance submitting to the qualified voters residing in Upper O'Malley Limited Road Service area. Public hearing in this matter is now open. If anyone wishing to be heard, please come forward. We have live, and I appreciate your patience in waiting through a long process. If we'd known that you were going to be here, we would have at least put you at 14A and not 14.
Very well said. My name is Pete Nelson, and I'm president of the Alpine Terrace homeowner subdivision. Thank you for the opportunity to speak before you tonight in support of the annexation of Alpine Terrace subdivision to Upper O'Malley subdivision. Alpine Terrace residents organized an association some 30 or 40 years ago to manage the responsibilities of the roads, just the snow removal and what upkeep we could manage to do. Over the course of these years, basically, the same few people have continued to collect the dues, contract for, and oversee the road maintenance. Collecting the dues has always been a terrific time consumer, and we're getting older, and decided not to hold any of these responsibility positions anymore, those of us that have. We know that the Muni can do a better job of collecting the necessary funds through property taxes and completing necessary maintenance. So I urge you to approve our application so the 2 subdivisions will be able to vote on it in April.
Thank you. I don't see anyone with questions. But thank you very much for coming down and speaking with us today.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else wishing to be heard on this matter? Hearing and seeing no one, the public hearing on this is closed. What is the wish of the body?
Move to approve.
Moved and seconded. I see no one in the queue for discussion. Oh, Mr. Starr, you're getting faster.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Mr. Starr.
The question I have is the split year. It shows effective, do we need to make sure they have the proper contract? I think you contract the Upper Hillside portion of this. Is that, I don't know whose list it is, but.
Looks like Ms. Johnston, who's in the queue, probably can answer. Oh, Ms. Johnston, I'll let you answer that.
I mean, does the contractor know that he's got to take this area over here pretty quick?
Actually, I don't know the answer to that. Yes? Okay.
I asked my colleague.
You can come forward. Just the person that spoke on behalf, go ahead and.
The contractor does know that he's going to take it on. He's been down and examined all the roads. We've had meetings with the Upper O'Malley presidents and groups, so there's no problems there, as far as I know.
Okay.
That's all, just to make sure the contractor's compensated under contract to do it. So.
Okay.
Thank you.
Ms. Johnson, you were in the queue. Do you want out of the queue? Okay. Mr. Birch.
I'll just simply speak in support of this. We look to Eagle River and the kind of a large consolidated road service area in effect up there, and I think this is a move in the right direction. It just kind of simplifies things and it makes it better, larger contracting areas and so forth. So appreciate you coming down and spending the evening with us tonight.
Thank you. It was interesting.
Okay. Thanks so much, and speak in support of this.
Ms. Johnston, I'm giving you a second chance.
I just want to say welcome to the neighborhood, and yes, that's my LERSA, and we get excellent service.
All right. Seeing no one else in the queue, any opposition to approval of item 14C? Hearing and seeing none, that is approved unanimously. That completes all the action items on our agenda. I have been advised there's at least one person that wants to join in audience participation. Is there anyone wishing to be heard in the world of audience participation? Mr. Whitaker, as the rumor had it, you were ready to be heard.
Yes, my name is Jed Whitaker, and we are in a unique time in the history of Anchorage where the chair will become the acting mayor. I presume or assume that it will be Mr. Clayman that will be the acting mayor, but due to the charter, Mr. Clayman will be allowed to veto, but he will not be allowed to vote. And so residents in our district will be deprived of a voting member on the assembly. The charter does not address through vacancy of assembly member the instant case of an acting mayor or the chair becoming the acting mayor, so that there's a little bit of a loophole in the existing law, and I've talked with various people. There does not seem to be a consensus as to whether the charter should be amended to allow for an interim appointment to the assembly so that our district would be represented as a voting member, or whether it could be done by ordinance. I think Mayor Begich believes that the charter needs to be amended so that our district could have a voting member. Other assembly people have suggested that it could be done by ordinance. Whether it's done by amending the charter or by ordinance, I think it is imperative that our district, Spenard and West Anchorage, have representation, voting representation on the assembly as provided for by the charter, because of the basic idea of our country, which is no taxation without representation. And so you all could address this question through getting legal advice. I understand there's been some legal opinions about this question, but it's clear that the framers of the charter did intend to address the question of vacancies on the assembly. They just didn't see so far into the future that an acting, the chair could become the acting mayor, and then what would happen. But the net result is that 6 months will go by without a voting member on the assembly to represent our district. And so I hope that you can find a solution to this, because this might not just be a once-in-a-lifetime thing, but it might be something that could occur again. So it's the 6 months.
Mr. Whitaker, you have the bright side. There's two people with questions. So I'm going to let you answer their questions. Mr. Flynn, you don't need to. I think you made your point pretty well. Mr. Flynn.
Actually, Mr. Chairman, just two very brief comments. Good news, Mr. Whitaker. Ms. Drummond is your other representative, and she will do an outstanding job for you in the event she's acting alone on behalf of your district. And point number two is made to Ms. Osiander on Friday. Some districts are used to it. Thank you.
That is because Mr. Flynn is a single-member district. Ms. Osiander.
Actually, that's exactly the point that I brought up Friday. It does give me some concern that we're basically going to be with a hole in our body for a certain period of time. Not only were we told that it's a charter issue, we were also, I suggested, well, what if the acting mayor resigned from his assembly seat? Could we then appoint? And we were told that no, not only can't you appoint then, but it could potentially cause the acting mayor to be bumped out of queue, and the new chair of the body would be bumped into queue. So we talked about a revolving door for acting mayors. It's a problem. It is, and I guess I'll tell you that I'll continue to try to find a solution. The difficulty with the charter, obviously, is the length of time it takes to deal with it.
Well, I guess that would require an election.
Right.
But because the courts are these things that take forever, look at the Exxon Valdez, if you passed an ordinance and got somebody up there, then there would be representation and let somebody sue.
Reckless disregard there, sir.
Well, I do believe that the intent is to have representation on the assembly, and that's the intent. And just because when the charter was passed that nobody thought of this particular case doesn't mean. I mean, I think the intent, if you want to. If I was a lawyer, I would look at it and say, I think the broad intent here is to provide for vacancies, filling vacancies on the assembly with the purpose of allowing for representation.
Okay, Mr. Whitaker, thank you. Ms. Drummond has a question. Before Ms. Drummond asks the question, I will reassure you that Ms. Drummond raised this same question to me, and I said to her, well, I don't know why anyone would be worried, because at your last campaign you had a commercial and it showed she could do 10 things at once. So anyway, Ms. Drummond has a question. Go ahead.
I appreciate the confidence my fellow assembly members have in me. Thanks so much, Mr. Whitaker, for coming. Mr. Whitaker had expressed this to me last week, and I passed on his request to Ms. Tucker, who does have an analysis of it. But it does appear to require a charter change. So it would take 2/3 of this body, I believe, to
put on the ballot.
Charter change to put on the ballot next spring. We have discovered that there are a number of seeming voids in the charter where it refers to the succession process. And I think this is a unique time in the history of our city, and I think we should address some of these issues as they come up.
Maybe you should get paid twice, Ms. Drummond.
Actually, there are provisions that prohibit that. All right, well, Mr. Whitaker, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I see no one else that wishes to join in audience participation. I think it's time for you, but I will just note it's Thanksgiving week, and I think I speak on behalf of the entire body that I wish everyone on this body and everyone in our city a wonderful Thanksgiving. We have so many things in our world and in our country and in our city to be thankful for, and this is a real time to reflect on those things and thank everyone. So thank you for a good meeting tonight, and I think we are adjourned.